And we have quorum.
I'm shocked too, but
Randy,
well, you know, like facilities, like I don't think we're meeting all.
we're going to start. We're good? We're good. Yeah.
Linda's gone. I think Shannon's gone.
I know.
I'm calling the meeting to order at 7:02. Welcome to regular meeting number 1411 of the Wachusett Regional School Committee. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on Holden TV Channel 194 and HoldenTV.com. Chair Runstrom could not be here in person tonight, so I am chairing this meeting. Next, we have public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak at public hearing? We have one signed up. Michelle and Jasmine Graywall.
I was like, good afternoon. No, good evening. There you go. My name is Michelle Graywell, and this is my daughter, Jasmine. She's a student at Davis Hill. We're just here to support the motion that the Special Education Parent Advisory Council has on the table. I think they have a number of motions, but we were just looking to support that. It's really important. Transparency in information is very important to us, and each PRS represents a family like mine or yours and anyone in here that's bringing forth a concern. And what I think is really important is to be able to have transparency of information and then work together to collaboratively address it, and so that we can continuously make improvements and make everything better. I appreciate all your work as school committee members, and I know that as you're a policy body, a finance body, but you're also here to ensure the quality of our education for all the students. And the PRS process is extremely important to being able to create, bring transparency to something, resolve it, and then move forward. So I please ask for your support in the motions that the Special Education Parent Advisory Council will be bringing. Thank you.
Thank you. Did anybody else want to speak at public address who did not sign up or sign in? No? Okay. Next up on the agenda tonight is a presentation from our Special Education Parents Advisory Council. Hi there. Yep.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, and thank you for providing CPAC the opportunity to present important data and information as we all prepare for the new school year. My name is Lindsay Lucasen, the Vice Chair of CPAC, and I'm grateful to be standing here alongside our Chair, Laura Ybarra. Tonight, while I learn how to use this, we would like to share with you some trends, data, and experiences of students in our district. For the past 3 years, I have advocated for this governing body to prioritize addressing the inequities faced by our students with disabilities. There have been instances where your actions have demonstrated a shared concern and a willingness to listen. However, there have also been occasions where decisions not to act or advocate for students with disabilities were justified by the focus on policy and budget matters, or by a desire not to overburden the administration. This evening, I am urging you to listen to our presentation and take action in accordance with your own MASC handbook and our WRSD policies. All of these documents affirm that the quality of education within WRSD is a direct responsibility of this governing body. It is your duty to advocate for the well-being and the best interest of all students. There are 5 motions on the agenda today pertaining to special education. CPAC requests that the school committee vote in favor of all of them. To refer policies 1000, 3820, and 3813 to the policy subcommittee and invite us to participate in the rewrite. To request then we have two motions that we'll talk about later that are pertaining to special education. Right now, I just want to jump into some data that CPAC has been looking at over the last few weeks. According to DESE DART data, WRSD serves 6,676 students, of whom 15.2%, or 1,014 students, are students with disabilities. These students are legally entitled to a free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, under both state and federal laws. However, in 2023, MCAS scores revealed that 81% of these students are not meeting their reading expectations. 79% are not meeting their math expectations. I just want to give a little context to this data. In 2017, the Supreme Court decision of Andrew versus Douglas County School District rejected the merely de minimis standard set by the 1982 Rowley decision, asserting that an educational program offering only minimal progress is not a true education. This landmark ruling emphasized the necessity of ensuring meaningful progress for all students. Given that 81% of our students with disabilities are not meeting their reading expectations and 79% are not meeting math, we must ask ourselves, are we truly fulfilling our obligation to provide these students with their civil right to a free and appropriate public education? Did you know that the dropout rate for students with disabilities is 4% higher than the state? A troubling indicator of the challenges these students face. Additionally, there's a significant gap between the proficiency rates on MCAS reading assessments between high school students with IEPs and those without. These disparities highlight the urgent need for targeted interventions and support to ensure that all students, particularly those with disabilities, have equal opportunity to success and graduate prepared for the future. Let's talk more about the MCAS scores. CPAC acknowledges the significant efforts made in onboarding our educators to enhanced curricula that supports the science of reading and math. However, when CPAC looked at the last 10 years of MCAS scores, it became evident that the decline in reading proficiency among our students with disabilities cannot be solely attributed to Fountas and Pinnell. 10 years ago, we had 45% of students with disabilities partially meeting or not meeting their reading expectations. By 2015, this figure improved, and 41% were not meeting their expectations. What this means is we had nearly 60% of our students with disabilities meeting or exceeding their reading expectations. How did we reach this point where last year the percentage of students not learning how to read nearly doubled? This is alarming, and it suggests that the challenges go beyond the Fountas-Pinnell curriculum and indicate a deeper systemic issue that urgently needs to be addressed. Is it possible that our expectations are too low for students with disabilities? Perhaps we do not really understand how neurodiversity, motor differences, or limb differences can affect one's access to learning. Are we providing our educators with professional development which address how to educate diverse learners? Do our special education programs have the tools, support, and educational background to ensure treatment fidelity for our most vulnerable students? The reality is some of our students with disabilities are being denied their right to an education. Have you considered the consequences when a disabled student is deprived their right to an education? This denial of this right leads to a cycle of oppression. It leads to higher unemployment rates and increased vulnerability to exploitation. This is the reality that some of the families in this district are facing because their students are not being educated. It will make it harder for them to raise their own children, and it will trap them in a cycle of poverty. These are not just educational failures, they are society failures that we must urgently address. Compounding these educational issues is the broken trust and lack of communication from special education leadership. There is a significant lack of responsiveness to parents who have concerns and the transparency around IEP decision-making. It is increasingly problematic. Alarmingly, we have special education administrators frequently misinterpreting special education laws, leading to a surge in problem resolution complaints, and as a result, more parents are turning to CPAC and this governing body for help in resolving issues. Too many times I have watched this room refuse to advocate in the best interest of students with disabilities to prevent the overburdening of the administration. However, when we shield the adults responsible for educating our children out of fear of overburdening them, the burden does not disappear. It shifts onto our children and their families. In a moment, Laura will be sharing problem resolution system data, including letters of finding provided to CPAC by Wachusett families. As you listen, I urge you to remember that not all families have the same privileges we do in simply being able to attend tonight's meeting, let alone advocate for their disabled child's right to an education. Families in our community without the privilege of time, financial resources, and knowledge of special education laws are often left with no choice but to accept what is given to them. I ask you to reflect on the resources WRSD has now and whether we are utilizing them equitably. Consider the level of support provided by the Director of Curriculum across all tiers of special education, and whether the multi-tiered systems of support effectively serve students in sub-separate classrooms. Some of our research revealed that the process of selecting curricula for sub-separate classrooms remains unclear, raising concerns about the appropriateness and effectiveness of the materials used. Furthermore, while unified classes at the high school level are valuable, there is a strong argument for focusing on similar inclusive opportunities in lower elementary grades where early intervention is crucial. Finally, we must critically assess whether current budget decisions, which may seem cost-effective in the short term, are ultimately short-sighted and fail to address the long-term needs of our students. And now I'm going to pass it over to Laura.
So as Lindsay stated, there have been some Wachusett families who have shared their PRS complaint letter of findings with CPAC. It's from these documents that we share the following data. We don't have access to all of the complaints that have been filed like the district does, and so therefore we're sharing this under the lens of what has been shared with CPAC. Since 2023, of what we've reviewed, there have been approximately 55 findings of noncompliance, 7 of which were determinations of a student being denied a free and appropriate public education. One PRS letter of finding cited the Wachusett Regional School District violating 17 federal and state laws with 1 child. In many cases, the corrective action plan requires the district to hire a third party to train staff in special education laws. Parents are reporting recently that those deadlines, those corrective action plan deadlines, are not being met by Wachusett. These are only the complaints that CPACs are aware of, and there are more. The data is incredibly important to you as a school committee, but also to our administration. They should be monitoring these issues closely to determine where we need significant immediate help. This is why the motion to request this data is so important. Our families have lost trust in our district to do the right thing. They've reached out to the right people, they've escalated as appropriate, and still no resolution. With nowhere else to turn, if possible, they spend hours and expend significant financial resources to hire an advocate to hold the district accountable. If they do not have this privilege, their child's educational needs are unmet. If they do proceed with the complaint, they experience relief when they receive a letter of finding from the state indicating noncompliance, which requires corrective action. However, now in many cases, we're hearing from families that the district is not responding to state-ordered deadlines. This requires families to wait even longer for their child to receive appropriate educational services and expend additional time and resources to obtain a resolution. Some of these complaints are egregious violations. An example of this is PRS 10119. This is a letter of finding that determines 17 violations of state and federal law, including a denial of FAPE, again, for one child. Individual actions and compensatory services were ordered for the student, and monthly monitoring was put in place required by PRS to ensure that this was done. Training was ordered to be completed prior to the start of the school year for the special ed director, special ed coordinators, and special ed support staff. That training was to be conducted by a non-district professional provider with special ed expertise, and that training would include, at a minimum, as you can see, a long list of various special ed laws. Other examples of violations include failure to provide special ed services for approximately 36 weeks, representing 54 hours of missed services. For required trainings by an independent expert, this wasn't something included in the budget. And when will this be done if professional development days are already planned and filled? Reports reviewed by CPAC indicated trends in the following areas of recurring violations of special ed laws. These were trends that we saw come up in multiple different PRS complaints. And again, these are just what CPAC was able to view. Denial of a free and appropriate public education, 7 instances. IEP implementation, transportation and reimbursement of transportation. Independent educational evaluations, prior written notice, child find, and lack of special ed policies and procedures. CPAC in our advisory role has stressed the importance of needing policies and procedures. If they don't exist, our staff and administration are unclear on how to operate. The law requires that you have policies and procedures related to special education. OCR has determined that 2 of our policies are discriminatory against those with disabilities. This is a big deal and not a trend that we want to continue. But a lack of special education policies and procedures also has financial ramifications to this district. The slide details conditions of assistance for the IDEA Part B. Each local educational agency in Massachusetts must review and agree to these conditions of assistance to be eligible for funding. So each year, the superintendent, special ed administrator, and chair of the school committee are required to complete and sign and attest to the conditions of assistance in order to receive that funding. And that's required for our district to be able to receive the federal special educational funds. So what that means if we're not compliant and we don't have special ed policies and procedures is, as outlined in the conditions of assistance, is that we are not eligible for the federal or state funding under Fund Code 240, which represents almost $1.9 million, and Fund Code 262. So that's a total of almost $2 million. PRS complaint 10953 has found the district non-compliant with not having policies and procedures related to the conditions of assistance. This is not just a nice thing to have. This is a requirement. Sadly, the corrective action for that PRS required by September 17th, the district shall submit to the department proof that the special education policies and procedures specific to IEP meeting requests and provision to IEPs to parents and guardians following an IEPT meeting have been approved by the district school committee and have been made readily available by September 17th. How will this deadline be met when this item is not even being discussed on tonight's agenda? This is incredibly troubling. The conditions of assistance also state that the LEA shall appoint an administrator of special ed who shall supervise all special ed and ensure compliance with all federal and state special education laws. These laws are not being followed. The conditions of assistance also requires Its related service personnel and paraprofessionals meet the mass requirements that apply to professional discipline in which the personnel are providing special ed or related services. Our district has a director of special education and student services who does not hold a license in the state of Massachusetts in special education administration, and we're not aware that a waiver has been applied for. Within the special education department, there's not one other individual that holds a special education administration license. Additionally, one individual appears to not have an active license at all. Lastly, there's a state law that requires districts with enrollments greater than 4,000 to appoint an administrator of special education who will devote full time to the duties involving and supervising the provision of all special education. Our current special ed director has various student support functions within their job description, which violates this law. How can we fix this? The data and the MCAS scores are frightening. The state of relationships with families and mistrust is irrevocably broken. We have a needs intervention status with a significant increase in PRS and OCR complaints. Without major changes, next year will not be any better. We have staff overseeing the special ed department that do not appear to have the appropriate license to do so or the correct role required for the district our size. Approximately $2 million in funding is on the line. How can we fix this? CPAC suggests talking to the amazing teachers and professionals that we have in this district. They are experts in their field. Ask them how things are going. They had great feedback over a year ago when we had a transition in special ed leadership, and I'd like to share some of the feedback from the 2023 special ed staff survey that the district completed at that time. 68 responses were received, and they were asked, what characteristic or trait do you feel would be essential for the new special ed director to possess? On the slide and on your screen, the results are a word cloud comprised of answers to this question. The larger the word, the more frequent it was used. What jumps out here when you look at that? Communicator, collaborative, knowledgeable, transparent, knows special ed law. A few comments, feedback taken from question number 3 of that survey. Do you have any additional comments that would like to be considered during this process? The new director should be responsive to community, the needs of students and staff. Leadership and clear planning is required to address the areas of deficit strength district-wide. This person should also have a background in special education and have the ability to plan and see event systems through to fruition. This person should also be visionary and have the ability to make necessary decisions to move the district from the old way of operating into a more sustainable model. I believe open communication is key. I would love to see this leader be organized, communicative, and willing to build relationships of trust and respect. A special education leader needs to be knowledgeable about the laws, care about compliance, and needs to be resourceful. This person should be current with educational trends while being an innovative leader. This is great feedback from our amazing teachers and special ed staff, but we could not be further away from their comments. Nothing has changed, and if possible, it's gotten worse. We have no vision. The recent strategic plan did not even include special education. We've had special ed specific strategic plans in the past, but they haven't been completed for a number of years. We need to make this a priority. Where do we go from here? In our advisory role to the school committee, CPAC strongly recommends that you support these 5 motions at a minimum, but we recommend that you do more. When you say special ed is in crisis, as we've heard repeatedly in these meetings, what that really means is families are in crisis and they can't wait any longer. CPAC is advising the school committee to support the 5 motions presented tonight related to special education and require CPAC involvement as an advisory role. Hold special ed administration accountable and set deadlines regarding the special ed program review and PRS complaint resolution. Require special ed administration to work with CPAC to conduct a staff survey on the status of special education. Call for special ed administration to create a vision for special education programming along with a detailed plan to get us out of this crisis. We thank you for your time and we welcome your thoughts and questions.
Does anyone have any questions? No? Thank you. Next is Chair's opening remarks. With this being our last meeting before the start of the school year, I'd like to wish all of the staff and students a relaxing end to their summer break. This is your reminder to set an alarm and begin adjusting your sleep schedule if needed. We've done that in my house already. I'd also like to note that this is my first time chairing at the big table, so I appreciate your patience if I make mistakes, and please feel free to redirect me if I do so. Thank you. Next up is the student representative reports. Our student reps typically join us when the new school year begins, and we hope to see them at our next meeting in September. We will now move on to the superintendent's report, and I will turn it over to Dr. Riley.
Thank you. I was wondering just if I could start through the chair just to talk a little bit about special education, which isn't on the superintendent's report, but I do want to acknowledge some of the things that were brought up tonight, and then also I think that it's important that some items get addressed as well, because at times things are said at public comment or in other forums, and the administration doesn't have a chance to share some thoughts on what's going as well. And so one of the things I just want to make sure the body and the public know is the administration here has never stated that there aren't grave concerns with special education in this district. I think we have concerns about our special education students. We have concerns about all of our learners. Some of the data that was shared tonight, I know I've shared several times in front of this body, especially around the 80% who aren't meeting or only partially meeting our standards. And that's reflected in our students in general, where it's almost 50% at the elementary level. And you're going to continue to hear us talk about our data because, quite frankly, the district isn't doing good enough. And I don't think we've ever stated that's the case. It's one of the reasons why we've concentrated on the things we have these last 2 years. Looking at MTSS, starting with our district accommodation plan, focusing on our tier 1 interventions, but almost our curriculums. And so there's a great need for us to do things differently. And our data shows a strong trend going down over the last 10 years. I think there's also a blip that I know Member Dubois had talked about before when they actually changed the MCAS and the ratings, and so that does explain the 40 to 60. However, what I would say, it's not good enough, and I don't think we ever claimed it would be. I think to say that we haven't been trying to make adjustments for our program and staffing is really, it doesn't notice certain things that truly are happening, whether it be a reading specialist at the high school, whether it be an additional special education teacher at Mayo Elementary, or at Central Tree Middle School, a school adjustment counselor for our TLC program at Davis Hill, another social worker, another one of our programs, BCBAs that have been added to the district. And certainly I know our intent is to present about special education the second meeting in September. But there have been really true changes in how we look at not only how we staff, but also how we support students. So looking at the fact that for the first time ever, we're going to have 2 unified sports teams, and we've increased those course offerings at the high school by 100%. It's going from 2 to 4. And do I feel like we need to do more? Absolutely. Absolutely. But what I wouldn't want to be out there unaddressed is that the district isn't putting its intent to try to make things better. You know, I feel like we've shared at this committee, and I've said publicly, I've said it at CPAC meetings, and we actually had a focus on special education at one of our education subcommittees in the last year. And one of the things I shared is that absolutely special education is a crisis similar to what business was in my first year in this district. And we have to find ways to do things better, and we have to be looking at not just the general classroom, but I would say it starts with tier 1. Kids getting what they get from their classroom teachers and having that accessible to them and not being pulled for services, making that sacred time. But we are making some of those changes, and I would hope that it starts to get reflected in the data as we start to get it in, although there'll probably be a blip with us implementing a new program. But a lot of this data isn't owned by our current special education director. They just started last year, and I think that's important to note. And I certainly would agree that the district needs to look at PRS complaints and try to look at that data in terms of what can we glean from this, where, if there are consistent issues over the last 2 years, and that's what I want to be clear about. The data that's being shared isn't just this last year, it's 2 years. But I also would share that at times, especially with the district's acknowledgement that there are lots of things that we need to fix, at times the constant requests for special programs or new focuses for both the district and special education, I worry at some point it's going to be harmful because it takes us away from the work that we've committed to honestly make a difference for all students. And I get worried about that. I think we've had 5 requests from 3 parents in the last month in terms of public information requests in terms of special education. When you look at those requests and the time it takes away from people in central office, it grinds us to a halt with some of the improvements we're trying to make. So I would appeal to people that they partner with us. And CPAC knows this because I made this, I let them know this, and we actually have agreed to look at their survey data together and to come up with a focus for special education. But it's why I meet with them, I offer to partner. I've actually offered to do a joint survey with them, and I know they feel like that right now. They don't feel like that's the time. But we are trying to partner with people, and I feel like I just, it's hard at times to hear things being perceived or being reported in a certain way. And my hope is that we will have principals, we will have teachers that will share how they think, how they feel things are improving in the district, because we're not perfect, not even close, and there's a lot of improvements we still need to make. But I'd also say there are a lot of people who are starting to feel some momentum that things are going to get better, and I hope they do because the kids deserve it. So I just wanted to start with that. I appreciate that, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to express my own feelings. So a couple of things we were going to share with you tonight. One is a business and finance update, and there are really 2 matters. Both, we were able to close out FY23 once and for all. The final audit was part of the superintendent's report, and it was actually presented by our firm Markham to the Audit Advisory Subcommittee on 7/18. Tonight, there's going to be a motion to accept this report on tonight's agenda, and with that, if that's approved, by school committee, it'll officially close out FY23. So, Michelle, thank you. And I thank her a lot, but we're finally down to one. No, not you, Michelle. No, all good.
You too.
Sorry, that wasn't. Thank you, Michelle. We're down to 2. We're in 2 fiscal years, planning for the next budget and implementing this one. That said, we also got news from the state this week, and there's another motion on tonight's agenda. The final FY25 state budget was delivered, and there was a difference in this iteration than the original budget that we planned, or the original budget that we had planned. Primarily, what you'll see in that is an increase in Chapter 70. The per pupil allowance went from $30 to $104. One of the things that was particularly difficult during the last budget cycle is the fact that the increase in our Chapter 70 funding had decreased by, I think, approximately $3 million. And so that was really harmful. It was particularly hard for the towns. And this final budget gives us approximately $500,000 in additional revenue for Chapter 70. And tonight, Dr. Grisey and myself are making the recommendation to school committee and ask for your consideration that we take this $500,000 in additional revenue and use it to reduce town assessments. We're making that recommendation for a number of reasons. Number one, the FY25 Chapter 70 increase, it's still $2.5 million less than it was last year. It really did place a disproportionate burden on our towns. Without an increase in our state funding, it fell on the towns if we were going to try to maintain a level services budget, which is what we provided. It also was the primary driver for them to have increases in their town assessments so large. I think the town of Princeton was over 7%, and the town of Rutland in particular also had quite a high increase. We have been able to address the district needs that we had outlined in the budget development process that we had said we wanted to make sure we took a look at. Amongst those are class size adjustments, in which we were still able to make 7 of those where they were needed. We were able to do that through efficiencies. And so we do not need this money to make sure that that happens. We've been able to make sure that's going to happen in the current budget. And then the last thing I'd say to you is that I really feel like this is the right thing to do. Our towns have supported us, and I'm going to share this when we look at some of the things that they've done in facilities. And we always talk about them being good partners, and I think they've accepted the challenge the last 2 years. And this is an opportunity, I feel, for the school committee and for the district to be good partners back. We have some towns who are really hurting in these town processes, and in particular, I think about the town of Paxton that's going to be losing police officers because they were unable to pass an override. We have a responsibility, I believe, as a school district to be good partners as well, and that's why we're making this recommendation. And I can assure you that we don't make it lightly. I am aware that this is money that, we could always put to use in the district. However, I'm banking on the towns to continue to be good partners like they have been for the last 2 years, and to work with us to make sure that we have sufficient funding to continue to move our programs forward. And so that's why I'm speaking to this with a little bit of passion, because both Michelle and I, when we went to the towns, we let them know we would be advocating for this if there was a change in Chapter 70, and I truly do believe it's the right thing to do. Next, I want to share a little bit of a facilities update. We included in the superintendent's report in a capital improvement plan, and it's earlier than we usually do. And the reason behind that is a lot of the towns are asking us to be more proactive and to make sure we're sharing our capital improvement needs earlier in the process. And a lot of them have adjusted their timelines. An example is the town of Princeton right now. They're going to be accepting those in September. So I very much would like to thank the Facilities Subcommittee to work with us to try to get an iteration of our capital improvement plan to the full committee in an earlier timeline, and then also to look at the requests that they would like to move forward for us to recommend to the towns. We are working to make the capital improvement plan more comprehensive. And so one of the things we need to do is to provide updated estimates. It's hard right now to get hard quotes. And Mark Wild, our facilities director, is particularly, you have to be careful about how often you ask people for quotes, and if they don't get the work or it's 5 years later, eventually it can impact your ability to do business. But we do know that we need to provide some updated estimates, not only for the towns in terms of some of the projects we're recommending, but to make the capital improvement document more viable and accurate in the things it's looking to do. We're also looking to add some funding opportunities. So if you look at some of the recommendations, particularly for the towns this year, they're not going to have a way to finance some of these projects just because the numbers are quite high. However, we are hoping that with green communities opportunities, specifically in Rutland and Princeton, by putting some of these things out there as the recommended and primary needs of the district for these buildings, we can look at opportunities like green communities, like the Mass Building Authority, to try to find some financing options that will help us move some of these projects forward. I think the last thing we want to make sure we try to do a better job of, and that we're able to put in the capital improvement plan, is tracking district maintenance cost. And so this will help us identify failing systems where we're putting lots of money into a system when really what's not needed is repairs or maintenance, but for a new system. And we have a couple examples in schools where we're spending twice the amount on maintenance on specific systems, and that's a sign that we need to do something different. The other thing is the use of our utilities. It's important that, especially as we are a green community district at this point, that we look at what we're spending on natural gas, oil, and then also electricity, and ask ourselves, is this the most efficient use of our money, or do we need to look at upgrades that will be more energy efficient? So with that, just highlighting, and I think Member Beardmore will also probably talk about this when we make the motion to accept. Just wanted to cover a couple of the items that we're recommending to our district town partners, and that we'd ask them to consider. In Holden, we're asking that they look at modular bathrooms for Dawson. They were able to put the modulars in last year, and the bathrooms would fully put the school into compliance with its student population. Also to look at HVAC upgrades that had begun at Mayo during COVID, but had not been finished. And so that's something we just kind of want on the radar, and in terms of is there a plan, can we make a plan to try to get those needs addressed. In Paxton, the recommendation from the subcommittee is the separation of the senior center from Paxton Center School. We have two buildings in the district that are not sprinkled. One of them is Thomas Prince, and the other one is Paxton Center School. This is really, to sprinkle a building is, I think the estimates are between $900,000 and more than $1 million. And so this is a case where it still is it's a hefty price tag, and Paxton actually put this in as a request to the state earlier this year amongst with some other projects of $150,000. But what it would effectively do is create a barrier between the Paxton Senior Building and the school, which right now are connected. And so it would effectively make both the senior center and the school safer if either entity had caught on fire. So we're replacing that. And then also putting on the radar the boiler and pumps at this point at the school will need to be looked at, and there has to be some plan to replace them. It is not a need that it has to be done in the next year, but again, the price tag for some of these projects, along with the projects in Holden, they're going to take some time to figure out in the approach that we would want to take. In Princeton, very similar, replace classroom univents at Thomas Prince. The approximate cost is $400,000. Do we expect the town of Princeton to be able to afford that in a regular budget cycle? No. I think, again, we're just trying to put out there that this is the primary need that we see in the building at this time. The univents at Thomas Prince actually have to be custom manufactured at this point. If they're going to do work on them, they're so old in that they're not in existence. A good piece of this is, though, that Princeton, as a green community, there may be some funding options for us to look towards it in the future. And then, as I said, as we look at our capital improvement plan and as we try to make it better, it's possible that we'll be aging into a period where they may be have access to Mass Building Authority funds, which always makes projects like this, especially through accelerated repair, far more feasible. In Rutland, we're requesting, or the subcommittee has voted to replace curbing, sidewalks, and parking lots at all the Rutland schools. That's almost $1 million. And to begin to replace classroom carpet with VC tile at Naquag, which is an approximate estimate of $125,000. What I'd say in Rutland is when we did our tours of the schools, we were very thankfully met by Representative Ferguson and also Senator Durant, especially at the Glenwood Elementary School. We have concerns about the concrete that was used to create that building. We are having a core sample taken because we feel like that may be bad, poor concrete and has led to a lot of these issues. And so certainly like this, we're trying to raise awareness of the issues. We understand that asking a town for over $1 million to repair these situations next year is something that we would have to work in partnership, and will quite frankly probably take several years for us to figure out. And then lastly, in Sterling, it would be to replace the Houghton gym floor. The gym floor right now has some cracks, but also some sizable divots that we worry about the safety, and we'd like to work not only to try to seal it, but also try to see what it would cost for a replacement moving forward in the future. What I hope, and I've tried to couch some of these recommendations in a way, what I really want to be thankful of and call out, and I also mentioned this in concert with the recommendation to reduce town assessments with our additional Chapter 70 funding, is how much the towns have supported our schools in the last 2+ years that I've been here. And I've just written down a few of the things that they've done in each of the towns. In Holden, they approved modular classrooms to be added to Dawson Elementary School this last year. They also have an approved funding for planned elementary security system improvements and playground repairs. All told, I think the last year has shown an influx of, I think, at least $800,000, if not more, by the town of Holden, and we certainly appreciate their support. In Paxton is the first school that moved forward with security improvements, and they've also paved their parking lot. Appreciate Paxton. I remember the first town meeting I went to, the superintendent, they were approving money to make security upgrades at the school. And they've been a good partner, and I look at the fact that they paved their parking lot, not by being asked, just because they felt it was the right thing to do. And so they're another example of good things happening in our towns. In Princeton, at Thomas Prince, they've made security improvements. They've replaced the locks, and they've also upgraded their security system over this summer. They've paved their parking lot, and they also have planned communications upgrades for the coming school year. Again, none of these things that I'm putting on this list even mention repairs that many of the towns have made when we've had system failures. So whether it's replacing boilers or a water pump at TPS, sometimes in excess of $50,000, the towns have stepped forward and made those improvements at the school. In Rutland, they've made upgraded security systems in all the school buildings this summer, and some of them are actually already complete, and I think they'll be completed before the start of the school year. This is a huge undertaking by the town of Rutland, and honestly, they added other projects to it that had not been specifically a big part of the capital improvement plan in prior years. A good example is they're replacing the floor on a second floor accessible playground at Glenwood School. It's not something that they needed to do, but they had a way to do it, and it's much needed and much appreciated. So thank you to the town of Rutland. And then finally Sterling, where they've replaced the common area and hallway with VCT tile and taken up carpet. They've upgraded their security systems, and those should be in place, and I think they actually are at this point. They put them in place over the summer. They added a new playground at the back of the school for use by the Houghton students, and they have planned communication systems upgrade for the coming year. I share all of this because I think it is important that we recognize there has been great improvement in these areas in terms of town support for our facilities and schools, and I want them to know that we appreciate it and we recognize these efforts, which I think have been honestly fantastic. I'd also want to make note, and I include this in the superintendent's report, we're also making significant district improvements or using district funds to make improvements in our schools ourselves. And this is not a complete list, and so this was the most recent one I could get my hands on. I'm honestly going to tell you that conservative estimates is that this is off by probably $300,000. All right, and so it doesn't include some things, and you'll see some discrepancies between the towns, and in part, it usually depends on whether or not a serving line has been ordered or not. Those are very high-priced tickets. Typically, I think they're over $80,000. So in Holden, we've used the food services revolving line to make almost $500,000 across 4 schools improvements in their kitchen areas. In Paxton, we spent $280,000. In Princeton, $85,000. In Rutland, kitchen improvements of $132,000. Right now, between the 3 schools, that's one of the figures I would expect to go up before the end of the summer. And then Sterling kitchen improvements between the schools, 2 schools have tapped out right now at about $178,000. All told, between these and some of the district school improvements through the food services line, we've put over $1 million into our schools in the past year and a half. And so obviously things that we weren't replacing things that didn't need to be replaced. The bottom line is, and I'm going to talk about our own facilities in the district in a little while, there's been years of neglect in a number of areas. Facilities, obviously, we talked tonight about it, education, but I do feel encouraged by some of the things that have happened in the last couple of years, because I think we're doing our best to rectify some of those issues. And so how about our district buildings? And so a lot of the town requests go to town-owned buildings, which are typically elementary and the middle schools, but we own, as a district, we're responsible for the early childhood center and then also for the high school. And honestly, these are 2 of the buildings that need the most attention in the entire district. And so I share this tonight, and I'm going to share specifically some of the recent incidents we've been dealing with at the high school, just to build awareness, because it is going to have to be one of the focuses we make as we go into the next fiscal year to try to plan about how we can support work that desperately needs to happen at both of these buildings. And so primarily what I would share about the ECC is we desperately need a third-party assessment about that building, and can it meet the needs of our early childhood population, and what is the life expectancy of that building. I think we want to make careful choices about what we're investing in the building. We are moving forward with a generator this year. It was the only school that did not have a generator prior to this year, and it also supports the central office and district Wi-Fi and other systems. And so it was really important, but it speaks to the building and the infrastructure and condition it's in. It needs a revised security system, and we've gotten some quotes, but we'll be moving forward with some of that work. The parking lot, not only does it need to be repaved, but if anybody's been at the ECC during drop-off or pickup, it's dangerous. and there's limited room for cars to move around, and students are out there with their parents and with support staff, but it's not a situation that any of us who have seen it would tell you that we're comfortable with. I think lastly, the playground. You know, we have more accessible playgrounds in all of our schools than at the ECC. Kids have a hard time accessing the playground. You know, if children in specifics have mobility issues, a lot of times even getting to the playground becomes a hazard for them. And so another clear need, HVAC systems, and then also bathrooms. I do feel like the third-party assessment is an important piece of this, because how we plan to spend money and where we look for ultimate solutions are going to be important, but there's no denying the building's in need of dire assistance. Similarly, I think if we look at the high school, it's a building in grave need of support and repair. At the high school, we have HVAC replacements and repairs that mostly due to when they were put in place, and I'll share some of that in a moment. But between rooftop units, a security wall that was under consideration at one time, upgrading interior lighting, replacing gym dividers, refinishing the gym floor, resurfacing or actually reboring tennis courts, upgrading the phone system, replacing the roof, the auto shop floor, which has failed. I'm going to share some pictures of that, and needs to be replaced. Camera upgrades, media center rug, sidewalk and exterior stair repairs, pavement repairs. They need a new tractor, and they had requested classroom window treatments because the way the classrooms are supported right now, at times visual devices are hard to view just from the sunlight coming in. And so when you look at the high school, and I'm always guilty of this, you know, you look at this room with the exception of the rug, but you look at the building from the street and it looks beautiful. It's a beautiful building. It's a beautiful campus. But the bottom line is the last time the district really put any funds into the high school was 20 years ago. And I think it bears kind of reminding that 20 years is when you would expect, and it's what we're honestly experiencing in a lot of our facilities. They were all built at a very similar time, whether it be the Holden buildings or buildings in other towns. And in the case of the high school, it would be expected that some of the HVAC units have ended their life expectancy around 20 years. I think what's not expected is that there's no plan to replace these units. And if you needed to replace all of them, it would be approximately $500,000. And so we need to get going to have a plan about how, as these systems fail, we proactively have identified a funding source that is going to keep the building sustainable and aren't trying to replace units as they fail, and classrooms aren't having heat or AC or appropriate air exchange when they do fail. I think it's important to understand, and this is something I had learned about after I came to the district, when the high school actually had this work done 20 years ago, the project had gone bankrupt. And so a lot of the work was not finished to the original specs, and a lot of the things changed when the money issues or funding issues became known. Examples of that are exterior walkways and stairs. These aren't the original plans for those areas, and right now, they're hazards. Similarly is the electrical system. You know, I was talking today, the electrical system was almost obsolete before it got put in here, and has constant failures. And at some point, we have to look at what's the right solution to a lot of these problems, and what's a pathway that we can partner with towns to make these improvements happen. I think it's important to know that the current failures, they're impacting the student experience. I'll share with you the auto shop story in a minute, but one of the things that happened this year is our tennis courts weren't approved for tournament play. And so while they were able to host some matches during the year, they made the tournament. They earned the right to host a tournament at the school, and we weren't able to do so. And this is similar to what I remember the first thing I encouraged when I came to the district when we hadn't repaired the track for a year. You know, these things can't happen. And kids are impacted in their senior year, junior year, whenever. You know, you talk about something that they can be totally proud of and should be proud of, making the state tournament, but they're not even effectively able to enjoy a home court advantage because their home court can't be used. And so, you know, another thing, I just want to be clear that some of these things we look at and we say, oh man, you know, we got to get on this soon. But sometimes in some of these situations, the impact has already been felt, and it's having an impact on our students. You know, many of the structural components of the building, they date back to the 1950s. In the case of the auto shop floor, I think the estimate was it was 1970 or before when it had been put in. A lot of these needs weren't needs, to be honest with you, probably 20 years ago, and they didn't make the original list when those improvements were being identified and that renovation period happened. But now they are extreme needs, and in the case, much like the tennis courts, even more so for the auto shop floor, it's impacting the services we're going to be able to provide those students, although we are working hard to make sure they're going to have a suitable experience this year. I share all this, to raise a sense of urgency, and especially when I share what happened in the auto shop, in terms of the importance that we figure out some plan forward for the high school. I'm very concerned about this building and the impact on staff and students. And so, you know, one of the things, what you're seeing here is something that happened, it was 3 weeks ago, I think at this point, and this is the auto shop floor. And what that's a picture of is a tractor falling through it. And it's a suspended concrete floor. And this is an area that has lifts and kids will work on cars in. And so, you know, after we moved the tractor, this is the hole. And, you know, it's obviously above another, it's not a classroom area, it's a storage area down the basement. I share this because I think this was on our list, and one of the things that we went and looked at when we recently did a facility review at the school. Did any of us think that something like this could happen? No. But where does your mind go? And certainly, don't get me wrong, I think we're very thankful for the operator of the tractor who responded very quickly, but I remember talking to him later in the day, and I couldn't believe he was, you know, still working. I can't imagine what that felt like, but then I also, your mind goes to there are kids in there, and there are kids working on cars, and those cars and that lift weigh more than that tractor. And so currently, the auto shop, you know, we actually obviously had structural engineers look at it, and also the building inspector. It's shut down. You know, we've gotten quotes. It's not something that could be fixed this year. It's a 3-month project at a minimum, and between demolition and pouring the new floor, that will take 3 months of time, and the staging and other things that they have to put in place for that work to happen, it would have to take place over the summer. And, you know, initial estimates, you know, we're going to be at least $300,000 to fix this. And that's early, you know, so we don't know really ultimately where it will fall. What I do know is it's a really important program for a number of kids. And we feel like we do have a solution where those kids are going to be able to continue to work, hopefully both on full-size autos, but then also in a classroom and also in a workshop space. But it speaks to the building and its condition in certain areas. And again, I'm not sharing this to be dramatic. I'm sharing it because it happened, and we're very concerned. And it does speak to the urgency of the needs to address the facilities at the high school. So, not really a thank you, but it's tough stuff to share, but it's our reality right now. I certainly am happy for the chair to answer questions if people have questions about capital improvement plan, recommendations in terms of Chapter 70 funding, or anything else in the superintendent's report.
Yeah, I'll start. That last piece on the floor, that auto shop floor, did the structural engineer go through and look at that yet? Do you have updates on?
And so what they're recommending, Member Beardmore, is that we would remove all the concrete. And part of the issue is, and you know, it's the story of the district, right? That's not something that happens in 10 months. That happens years, decades. And I think that one of the things that hadn't happened there, and one of the things I honestly, you know, I always talk about Director Grise and the work she's done to pull us out of the financial mess. I would say similarly, Mark Weil deserves a lot of credit as facilities director, and some of the things that Mark has pushed us to do to make sure we're taking care of things in the proper way, all right? And so a couple examples are the track, where we didn't have functioning drains, and that was leading to the area not operating the way it should. Similarly, one of the things Mark did when he was looking at the drains up there, and actually I don't know if the committee remembers, we had a flood earlier too, where we had inoperable drains in one of our catchment areas. But at that time, Mark also had them do the auto shop drains, which weren't functioning.
Yeah.
And hadn't been for years. And so my guess is that that's an area which catches water. Infrastructure underneath, right? It's suspended concrete, and the girders are fine. So you get major kind of steel beams
Yeah.
that go across, and I think they're at 4 feet across. That's structural, and that's fine. What isn't is underneath, they have kind of a corrugated steel in the very bottom, and then you have a rebar or some other things that the concrete gets poured into. The concrete floor is 3 inches. Typically, they're thicker than that. Again, I'm not suggesting in any ways people didn't meet the code when they built it. Codes change, and so I don't know what it was in 50 or 70 when the floor was initially put in. But the water, that's part of the problem. And so that corrugated steel, the rebar mesh, if there were cracks or holes in the floor, primarily cracks, I mean, they've seeped into that, and then those 2 structures would need to be
Freeze and
replaced
expand.
completely too. And they, part of the estimate would be to put down a new corrugated bottom, obviously have rebar, and then re-pour the entire floor. So it's going to be a major project, and that's why it's kind of delicate. You could kind of see it in the second picture I saw. Beneath there are pipes, there are other things, and then you also have to be cognizant if you don't want the concrete to fall down and cause more damage there as well. And so it really is a kind of major, it's going to be a major project. And so we would hope that we could get it done in over the course of a summer, but, estimates right now are 3 months, so even that would be potentially tight.
But the makerspace is okay then?
Yeah, makerspace is okay, and we do check, and, one of the things that was impressive that day when we went down, impressive's the wrong word, I was glad was in place, was checking out the other areas adjacent to, building. I think one of the things that did contribute to this was the fact that water was exposed, whether they're hosing down the area or cleaning it, where that's not the case in the makerspace area, or they haven't had those issues. But we also looked, and they took out ceiling tiles to make sure there isn't rust going on in other areas where students are having classes and other areas like that. The whole area underneath that is really storage. I think we have some custodial washing machines in there and other things, but definitely scary, definitely concerning. But we have no reason to believe that it impacts other areas of the school other than that. But that whole area, it's condemned. And so
Yeah.
it's all completely locked off. Nobody can access it. And the building inspector was very good to work with, and Holden came in, said you can't do it. And that is our work, is working with structural engineers to say what's the pathway forward and what do they recommend, and to make sure everything's safe around it.
Can I follow up, please? So I know next steps, there's probably a process, and you're probably planning out the next steps. Maybe you've done it, maybe you haven't, but reaching out to parents and students and curriculum, like a domino effect here is going to happen in the next couple of weeks. If you haven't started that, maybe you can elaborate or just let us know what the next steps are.
I've probably been in 3 meetings at the high school about the auto shop, been on site 4 or 5 times. We've done a couple things. We've identified a space we're going to be splitting, and I think partly we have confidence that we're going to be able to offer programming for these kids.
Great.
And I think if you ask me, if you take it in sections, right, I've identified a classroom space for them. They'll have a designated classroom. Identified a working space for them. They're going to work in part of makerspace, which would allow them to have access to, say, an engine on a lift or other work that they can do that doesn't require a full-size automobile to be in, because they did all kinds of different work. But
Yeah.
they'll have some hands-on teaching opportunities immediately when they return to school. And so we've identified that and be making some of those changes. The last thing we're working on is a designated space, which we're going to ideally move forward to, and I would say this part of it's not 100%, but it speaks to the work that we're trying to do, is to have an access bay and a structure near the stadium over here at the athletic field, that in its initial iteration would be used so that you could actually we could move the lifts ideally have them put into a concrete slab, and the kids could continue working on full-size cars until we're able to fix that area. And so it's 3 designated spaces instead of 1. It's 3 different components where we do classroom, smaller hands-on, and then full-size vehicles. I think the thoughts for the vehicle piece, we wouldn't be able to have that place. Best estimates are November, probably of this year, because we're going through the process of getting estimates and looking at different iterations and seeing what needs they could also meet besides the auto body. But that's where we're at. I feel good about all of them. I feel lousy about the full size vehicle time, if that didn't happen into November, but I am confident that if we can get all 3 of those things in place, the kids are going to have a good experience. Because it's really valuable. I mean, we talked about this when we went around and we were talking about the floor, and the bottom line is, like, we have to understand that every child's experience at the high school is going to be different. For some kids, those are athletics, and for some kids, it's programs that they're interested in, such as auto body, and we want to keep those kids engaged. We want, a lot of times, those can be the classroom that they look forward to the most, and we don't want that experience to be impacted. So we feel horrible about what happened. We're very thankful that nobody got hurt, and we feel we're at a decent spot in terms of what we're going to be able to provide those kids for programming. But only 2/3 of the way there. We still were working on that full-size vehicle option. But we think we've got a solution.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to emphasize, I love to see the optimism and thinking outside the box, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Me too.
Oh, Jana?
Thanks. Can I jump to the FY25 assessments, or did you want to stick with the CIP?
Whatever you want.
Okay. So I took a look at all the numbers and everything that you and Director Grisey presented. And I appreciate your thought as far as wanting to be good partners with the towns. We all want to be good partners with the towns. But when I looked at the numbers, I feel like giving back $500,000 divided between 5 towns does not have a huge impact on many of those towns, dollar-wise. I'm not saying it has no impact, it is some money. But it doesn't make an impact on each individual town the way that it does when it's coalesced to $500,000 at the district. And I feel like when the budget was presented to us, we were told that in order to try to make it work for the towns, that it was a very tight budget, that it was tight in salary line items in particular, and a couple of other areas. And since we already have the budget passed, I do have some concerns that giving back this small amount of money will impact the towns less than where it could impact our schools as a unified dollar amount. I have some concerns on things happening like we just talked about. A lot of these buildings have a lot of issues. If something comes up in the middle of the year, a floor just fell through, we could potentially need that $500,000. If we need to hire, more aides or anything for special ed, we might need those dollars. And so while I understand the gesture, I don't feel that it's enough money to change the impact on the towns, whereas we could potentially run into the need to use that money. I'd also like to point out that if we do not need that money and we have money left at the end of the year, by law, that is going to roll over to E&D, which is only our savings, and if we choose to use that, the towns have to approve that anyway. So it still would roll back into their money in the long run if we didn't need it for some reason. But just knowing that the budget is tight, I feel personally like we're working well with the towns, and that this is money that we should probably just hang on to, considering how many issues we've talked about already today that could come up. So that's just my
Yeah, I mean, if I can respond,
Point of order, clarification question.
Yep.
I also have comments on this, but I thought it was more appropriate to save them for when we're discussing the motion itself. So can I clarify if we are to make them now or wait until the motion?
Whatever you want to
I
do.
can,
I just wanted to check before we all start adding our comments.
does anybody have anything to discuss in the superintendent's report besides the things in the next 6 motions? Because then we will save it until the motions.
We can save it
No.
if you want.
I was just clarifying.
Okay. No, you're right, and thank you.
Do you want me to start with a response to what she asked when we get to
Yeah.
that point? Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I have to read this whole thing, so why don't you respond to her now, and then I'll read the motion, and then, because I have to read all the numbers.
And so, one of the things is, on some of the towns, it's going to have a very real impact. And say, I shared in Paxton right now, they're down over 2 police officers. And I believe Paxton, the amount is about $48,000. And that would go towards a large amount of replacing a police officer in that town. And I'm very cognizant of those things. And we did have a very tight budget, and we did do our best to get it down to a number that we felt we could hopefully pass with the towns. And we have, I'll point out, the last 2 budget cycles, I think you could go back 15 years, and there haven't been as large increases passed on to the towns than what we've passed the last 2 years, and the towns have supported us. If we had the $500,000 in Chapter 70 funding, I don't think Director Grise and I would have put forth the budget amount that we did. I think it would have been less than that, and I think we're being honest about that. And I think that it's not just Paxton. I think other towns are under considerable financial restraints. I think most of our towns could be looking at overrides in the next year. And then lastly, I'll share with you, in terms of us being concerned that we were going to pass the budget, I've said so publicly during both school committee meetings, and I said at all the town meetings that we would be making the recommendation. And I don't make the recommendation lightly. I make it because I really feel like it's having a hard impact on our towns, and they were put in an unfair position by the funding that was put forth by the state this year. And do I feel great about where we are financially as a district? I do not. We still have so many needs, whether it be staffing or facilities, that we need to move forward with. But I also feel like if we're always only so focused on the moment, we're losing sight of long-term partnership and planning with the towns, which I feel like the last 2 years have been more successful in than at least the last 10 years around here. And so I don't want to take any chances of forfeiting that. And, if the towns, if we trust them as partners, and I think some of them actually really do need the money. And I think the others, if they understand that when we say we're going to do something, or at least for the district, and I haven't promised school committee, this is a school committee decision. But if I say I'm going to do something as superintendent, Director Grise says she's going to do something as the finance director, we're going to do it. We make tough recommendations. School committee doesn't have to agree with them, but we feel like it's important that we present this the way we did.
Thanks. At this point, we're going to move on to recommendations requiring action by the school committee. At this time, I would accept a motion to authorize the use of $505,038 of additional Chapter 70 funds as a funding source for FY25, and thereby reduce the assessment to the member towns as follows: Holden, $37,256,959. Paxton, $7,740,336. Princeton, $6,074,615. Rutland, $16,432,498. And Sterling, $13,557,080, as a total of $81,061,488. Did I get all the numbers right?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Malia?
Okay, so this motion, while I understand the desire for partnership, I have actually said this previously in other meetings when this was discussed, that this would be the administration's plan. I am concerned that, again, with the cost-benefit analysis to the district as a whole, with unexpected expenses, with our E&D being at barely 1%, which we have also discussed during the budget process, the need to increase that. And I think some of the towns even expressed that they agreed with that philosophy in some of our finance meetings that we've had. I think, obviously, there's really not I don't know if there's really a win-win situation here. I think it's tricky for all. But I also have concerns based on the state numbers, because while the state did implement a short-term solution by increasing this per pupil rate, they didn't take care of the long-term problems. They didn't increase the inflation rate. They didn't take care of the other funding things that were brought to their attention. This is like a Band-Aid, and honestly, next year, it's going to keep us, probably increase the chance that we're going to be in hold harmless again and dealing with some of the same problems. And we have unknown expenses, like the floor that now we have to figure out how to deal with, that are unanticipated. We've been talking about the tennis courts for at least 3 budget years now, and the need, I actually had forgotten that they were taken off last year because of our budget situation, but I remember discussions, they need to get done. The track is hanging out in the background. It's not on the list, but it's approaching 8 years.
No,
And
we replaced it 2 years ago.
not the track, I'm sorry, the field. Sorry, I meant the field. Without a plan to replace that, it's not even in the discussion right now, and obviously there's other more pressing things. But I am concerned that while this seems like a small amount of money, I hate to say this because I really respect the partnership aspect, and I respect what our towns are doing, and I understand some of their situations. But I'm also concerned about us as the district and our need to be fiscally responsible for the district. And so right now, as it stands, I would not be in favor of this, giving all of it back to them, because I think we have some very real questions. And I think if we look to next year, yes, we may need to discuss some bigger things, which you talked about. But I don't think this $500,000 is going to make a huge difference either way to how those discussions go. I think our issues are going to remain, and I have problems with this. I don't know if we want to have a good faith effort. I don't know if it would be theoretically possible to split the difference, perhaps, if we wanted to still have a good faith effort we make with them. But I think it's fiscally concerning to me to not put this into E&D when we have some unknown things, particularly one that just happened last week that has come up and we may need to address.
I think is it
Yep.
okay? So I think we feel like our revenue sources, we're going to have a healthier amount in E&D moving into next year. Not to where we want to be, ideally we're 2-3%. But more in that direction. What I would share is when we look at the capital improvements that need to happen, as an example, at the high school, the way we tried to address it this year, because simply first of all, I would say the magnitude of understanding of the work that needs to happen at the high school, I think the more times we go there or spend time looking at the facility, the more things we uncover and the more things we need to add to the list. I think there needs to be a long-term solution that allows the towns, if they would commit towards it, we need to look at systems like how we can borrow. I think we have to look at avenues that would allow them to pursue debt exclusions, okay, which means that they wouldn't have to worry about a 2.5% and us making requests on a yearly basis that's going to put them over. I think we put certain money into the budget this year, specifically around the intercom and then also sound system, because those things needed to be done and there wasn't time to put a plan together. I would say that long-term, this is a facility that needs an infusion of multiple millions of dollars to get it to where it needs to be. I'm not suggesting that happens in 1 year, but we have to have a plan on how to do that, and I think it has to be in concert with the towns, and it needs to be in a way that I would say allows them to make best, to be partners in those fiscal decisions. So if they want to pursue a debt exclusion or advocate for something like that, we need to sit down and talk to them about that. And so I just don't, I would just say that some of the things I brought up tonight, yes, I'm extremely concerned about them, but there's a list of about 20 things. And taking one off that list, I'm not sure, and thinking that that's going to really make a dent in what really needs to happen, I'm not sure that's an accurate picture. Like it's a really big deal, and we have to have a major financial plan on how to address the needs of this building.
Sherry, then Scott.
I'm going to support this motion. We don't make our budget, or we haven't made our budget this year, and to my knowledge, with a number in mind for the towns. We made the budget with the needs of the schools. And we went to the towns and said, this is what we need. And yes, we were lean, but the towns are lean too. And we went to them and said, this is what we need. And now for us to say that we had something unexpected come up, well, of course, we didn't know about the auto shop. But beyond that, all of our needs are known. If we need to build more into next year's budget because we're not meeting those needs, then that's when we need to do it. That's the budget that we approved, and I think that we should give this back to the towns.
Scott?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. So I appreciate what Member Gustafson and Member Brennan said, but I need to speak as a Paxton representative. And, you know, this year Paxton passed the school budget. They supported the school budget with no override, passed it. However, there was a significant override in terms of town services. And those of you that don't live in Paxton might not know that those overrides all failed. So there were significant budget cuts on the municipal side in Paxton this year, including 4 police department positions, significant cuts to the fire department, DPW, emergency services, ambulance, and the library, amongst other things. There's an attempt right now to put back at a special town meeting later this month 2 of the police officer positions, so we actually get around the clock coverage, which otherwise we won't have in Paxton this year. So they're trying to restore about $300,000 into the budget. So yeah, I understand that this isn't a lot of money in the, you know, the big term. However, like $45,000 or $50,000 for Paxton, and that $300,000 that they're trying to restore is going to go a long way. It's going to save about 25% of what they were going to take out of the stabilization fund, which is how they were planning to support those positions. Those are one-time funds that we won't get back. So to say that this isn't a significant amount of money is just not true in terms of the Paxton budget this year. So I strongly support giving this money back to the towns. This was unexpected revenue. If we'd known we had this Chapter 70 money back in February, we would have reduced the assessments at that time. So I think this is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Melissa?
I just want to say that as a Sterling representative that I support this motion. Sterling was the only town that did not pass the budget, and this good faith that was brought to them to reduce the assessment, would build, I think, trust in our community, especially going into next year when there would be a possibility for an override. That was talked about at our town meetings, so I support this motion at this time.
Thanks. Anyone else? I'll just add my own comment, and maybe this is because of the family of public servants that I came from, but I always think of the district as one of many public services that all of the citizens of our 5 towns benefit from, and I hate to hear that Paxton might not have 24-hour coverage of police. I can't really imagine that. So I just think that, you know, we need to remember that we are 5 towns, and that is what we are made up of, so. Anyone else? No? Randy, ready for a roll call vote?
Member Wallace?
Yes.
Member Gustafson?
I'm not sure. No.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Lorway?
Lorway, yes.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Vice Chair Salmon Garrett? do I do Renstrom?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Chair Renstrom?
This is budget. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Point of order. This is budget, so you should probably vote, Lauren.
Yes.
Yes. And Chair Renstrom?
Runstrom, yes.
And the motion passes. Next, I would accept a motion to approve the updated 10-year capital improvement plan as presented. It was presented in the superintendent's report.
So moved.
Second.
Jana and Brett. Any discussion? Jana?
Yeah, I just had a couple quick questions. Jim, you mentioned a couple things on the list for the high school, but they weren't on the plan?
Yeah. And so we recently met, I'd say we've primarily focused right now on trying to get a solution for the auto shop kids. Some of the things, the list that we had provided during the presentation, that was from the capital improvement plan, or at least the version I was looking at a little bit earlier, but it doesn't reflect all of the needs at the high school that we've uncovered. I would tell you that it's going to be one of our priorities early on in early meetings with the town managers in terms of this is the full scope of the projects we feel like need to happen at the high school, and to try to get cost estimates so we can move forward with some type of plan to support them. The piece I'd say to you is no, both the high school and ECC, there aren't recommendations from the subcommittee
Right.
to them, and so I apologize if I misinterpreted. I'm sorry, Member Brennan. So no, they weren't. I think in part because we are going to come forward, I think, with proposals to the school committee at a later date for those two entities. And if we're not able to support them with the towns and say, look at a debt exclusion or looking to take a loan to support some of them, then we're going to have to do what we did this year and try to fold them into the budget and prioritize them. You know, clearly the auto shop is a concern, a bunch of these on the list
Okay.
of the concerns.
So even though it says we're approving the plan as a whole, really the district portion is still going to be looked at more later? Oh, okay.
Absolutely. Sorry, and I misunderstood.
Okay.
Apologize.
Just real quick, as a member of facilities, Member Beardmore, do you have anything to say about the motion, to speak on it?
No, I really don't. I thought Dr. Riley really covered everything that I wanted to say.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Sherry?
Just a reminder that the capital improvement plan is a fluid document.
Right.
And it can change tomorrow.
Sure.
You know, if there's another problem, something else can get added. So the fact that we approve this today is for benefit of knowing what's out there, but
Right.
not to say that it can't change.
Sure.
Anyone else? Nope. Ready for a roll call vote?
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes?
Member Salmon Garrett?
Sam and Garrett, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Member Lorway?
Lorway, yes.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Chair Renstrom?
Runstrom, yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. We will move on to the next. I would accept a motion to recommend capital projects for the member towns to undertake for FY26, and I will read them into the record. Holden modular bathrooms at Dawson, approximately $50,000, and complete the HVAC upgrades begun at Mayo, approximately $200,000. Paxton, separation of the senior center for PCS, approximately $150,000, and replace boiler and pumps, approximately $200,000. Princeton, replace classroom univents at TPS, approximately $400,000. Rutland, replace curbing, sidewalks, and parking lots at all Rutland schools, approximately $980,000, and begin to replace classroom carpet with VCT tile at Naquag, approximately $125,000. Sterling, replace Houghton gym floor to be determined cost.
So moved.
Second.
Sherry and Brett. Discussion? Questions? No? No questions? Okay, we'll move to a roll call vote.
Member Lorway?
Lorway, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Chair Renstrom?
Renstrom, yes.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Sarah Garrett?
Sammy Garrett, yes.
Pass.
And the motion passes. Next, we're going to discuss three motions, one at a time, that were brought forward by the administration. I would accept a motion to refer Policy 1000, policy related to operations, non-discrimination, and harassment, to the Policy Subcommittee.
Second.
Dr. Riley, do you want to speak to that?
Has to do with changes in Title IX, this one. You know, to be up to date with the changes in the policy. I know Maria had suggested to us this is a policy we need to look at. We're undergoing training, and then we're also looking at how we're going to implement that policy and the changes that took place over the summer moving forward. And one of them is that we got to look at our policy and make some changes. I haven't sat down with Maria to know the exact changes she would suggest or to take a look at. I do know she feels like that's something that would be a district priority moving forward for the administration.
Any other discussion or questions?
No, I would just say that we have received also some MASC materials about Title IX is being updated and that they're updating their policy and that all schools will have to update their policy. So we have to update the policy.
Thank you. All right, seeing no more comments, we'll move to a roll call vote.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Member Lorway?
Lorway, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Chair Renstrom?
Renstrom, yes.
Vice Chair Salmon Garrett.
Sammy Garrett, yes. On to the next. I would accept a motion to refer Policy 3820, policy related to education, observation of education programs for special needs students, to the Policy Subcommittee.
So moved.
Second.
Sherry and Brett. Dr. Riley, you want to?
Yeah, the district received an OCR complaint because we had a observation policy, or there was a policy in the district for observation of special education classes, and I don't believe there was one for general educational students. And so with OCR, they contact you and they said, look, there's a complaint around this. Would you like to address this, or would you like us to investigate? And obviously, we shouldn't have separate policies for students with disabilities and students with not, so we said, no, we'd like to address it. At that time, when we spoke to them, we explained to them that it was right prior to potentially a policy subcommittee being started, and then also, you know, didn't know what appropriate committee would be on, so explained to them, look, we wouldn't be able to make policy changes until approximately November, best case scenario of this year. And so they talked about that it was acceptable if we made different, that we made adjustments in how it was processed and the procedures associated with that, and they understood the timeline for a policy, but now that we do have a policy subcommittee and we can refer it, then we're doing so. So.
Any other questions or comments? Scott?
I believe a member of the public emailed me to comment on this policy at the meeting today, as outlined in our policy.
Thank you, Scott.
Yep.
Thank you. Just wanted to discuss the resolution agreement that was signed by the district and make sure that all are aware of the deadlines. In that resolution agreement that was signed on June 25th, it said that the district will review and revise as necessary its visitation and observation policies and procedures to ensure that there are no different or additional requirements to observe or visit the classrooms or instruction of students with disabilities than those of students without disabilities. The reporting requirements in the agreement with OCR are by September 1st. The district will submit all observation and visitation policies and procedures applicable to any and all schools throughout the district to OCR for its review and approval. So whereas this is being referred to the subcommittee, the policy subcommittee, I believe that's meeting at the end of August. The deadline for completion for this is September 1st. So time is of the essence.
And so I, as a person who spoke to OCR with Maria Lataz, I can tell you that they're fully aware of what our timeline is and what the expectations are. And so I just know we're not going to be out of compliance with what OCR's expectations are. And so I just want to offer that to the committee. We wouldn't have made these statements, we wouldn't have agreed to the resolution without having met with them and spoken to them on the phone about what we were able to do and what we weren't able to do. They're not expecting this policy to be completed by September 1st.
Okay, there seems to be a little confusion. Attorney Colleen Robinson with OCR has indicated that there's been no extensions to that agreement, so perhaps that should be something that's cleared up.
Yeah, I would agree, and I can only tell you what our conversations were with her and her full understanding of where we are.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Member Lorway?
Lorway, yes.
Chair Renstrom?
Renstrom, yes.
Vice Chair Salmon Garrett.
Salmon Garrett, yes. On to the next. The motion passes, and on to the next. I would accept a motion to refer policy 3813, policy related to education, audio, video, and/or stenographic recordings of meetings, to the policy subcommittee.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, or would you like to explain?
We had an OCR complaint related to this policy as well, specifically that we didn't have procedures in place to make determinations, it just wasn't clear in multiple areas in terms of what was acceptable, in terms of what people provide for documentation. There was no interactive process, which really should be in place, and I think that's probably what Maria's primary recommendation would be. And so if people are requesting to have some type of accommodation, there should be an interactive place in the district where they can hold meetings, offer accommodations, and go back and forth with the person for that. None of that was in place. And so, another one where we said, yep, we would agree that there aren't procedures in place that should be in place, and agreed to both establish procedures, which Maria has shared with them, but then also refer to the subcommittee to make sure the policy reflects what is going to be appropriate moving forward.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Seeing
I just have a
Jana.
Is this related to the previous policy as far as timeline? Not in terms of what it is, in terms of,
And so I'm honestly, and I wasn't trying to be confrontational, I don't doubt that, say, Attorney Robinson said there's no change in timeline, but what I think is unclear is that we've explicitly discussed with Attorney Robinson what we are able to do and what we're not able to do, and I think people are interpreting the agreement differently than we have, and I think even Attorney Robinson. This one is a different one. There aren't and I'll be honest with you, with this one, Maria has primarily been the contact with OCR. And again, the more important thing for them is that there are procedures in place and they're expressed, and that we look to update the policy as soon as we're able. And so that's why we're making the referral at this time. I'm personally, and I think I would hope you recognize over the last 2 years that if I'm wrong or I make a mistake, I'll admit it and share it with the full committee and the public. I don't have concerns with the timelines for either one of these referral in terms of looking at the policies. And I trust Maria in her conversation about this one, and I was with Maria when we spoke to Attorney Robinson for the former. And so I think that my request to the policy subcommittee is that these are marked as urgent as any policy review. I think they are the most important ones from the district perspective for us to be reviewing in that subcommittee. But I'm confident as long as we're going through the process, and we try to do that as expediently as possible, we're going to be in full compliance with OCR.
okay,
And
yeah.
and we wouldn't, I guess the other thing I'd say is when you do this, you're saying to OCR, yeah, you're right, there's an issue here and we'd like to fix it. It's not like they don't even come in and necessarily investigate it. And so I think we're coming from it from a perspective where we're trying to solve an issue that has to do with, in some cases, policies that have been in existence for a number of years.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of make note that we have 3 pretty big timely policies going to the policy subcommittee, and I would like them to have a decent understanding of timeline, but also the understanding of, you know, how quickly they might actually be able to get these 3 done, so.
Member Wallace and then Member Beerbohr.
I just have a clarifying question, being new to the board. Can you tell me who Maria is?
Oh, sorry.
Just, so, and also for the public, if you,
Yeah, no, I apologize. Dr. Maria Lataz, who's the Director of Student Support, and so heading up guidance services, she does things like residency issues, 504, Title IX, all of those things. I think we renamed, it probably previously would have been the Director of Social Emotional kind of Learning, but that position really wasn't named for what that position actually.
I know who she is now that you
Okay.
explained. I just
Oh,
didn't know
no,
if
no, I
Maria was the
apologize.
attorney for the district or not. Thank you.
Member Beerbohr.
To build on what Member Jana just said, we're putting a lot on policy subcommittee, and I think for a future meeting, we should kind of come back and once they meet, kind of regroup on their list and priorities and what's really going to be an acceptable number of policies for them to get through. Because I don't want people to think, oh, we're giving the policy, but they can only handle so much. I think that's a caveat that we need to keep in mind here.
They've got quite a few already on there.
Yeah, they do, like 9 or 12.
Being on the committee, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I would agree with Member Beardmore to the extent that we're just asking them to look at them. In this case, it's different. They have a timeline. I mean, all of our policies, with the exception of maybe, I don't know, 20, have to be updated according to our bylaws.
Right.
So it's simply to say that we're not going to give them to them additional policies because it's additional work. I don't think that's really a factor. It's just a matter of prioritization.
Right.
Member Gustafson.
I just had a really quick comment. That these are actually, ironically, this one and the previous one are actually policies we did review in our normal timeline. We last reviewed them in 2022. However, obviously, when you have OCR complaints, there are things that need updated that we didn't know about then, or perhaps interpretations have changed, or we even had different personnel in the district then. So we don't know enough about how these came to be. It doesn't really matter. But these are ironically 2 policies that were recently reviewed. So hopefully the changes to them will be able to be made fairly quickly because they were just done 2 years ago. It's just we have to fix these issues, obviously. So I'm hoping that can be done relatively quickly.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote.
Member Lorway,
Norway, yes.
Member Winters,
Winters, yes.
Member Gustafson,
Gustafson, yes?
Member Wallace,
Wallace, yes.
Member Brennan,
Brennan, yes.
Member Beardmore,
Beardmore, yes.
Member Haber,
Haber, yes.
Chair Renstrom,
Renstrom, yes.
Vice Chair Salmon Garrett.
Salmon Garrett, yes. And the motion passes. Next on the agenda is unfinished business. We have no unfinished business tonight. Then on to the Secretary's report. We have a consent agenda tonight consisting of the following items: approval of the regular session minutes of July 8th, 2024, approval of the Management Subcommittee minutes of January 4th, 2024, approval of the Education Subcommittee minutes of April 4th, 2024, approval of the Ad Hoc Subcommittee to Improve School Committee Operations minutes of March 4th, 2024, approval of the Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism minutes of April 10th, 2024. Would anyone like any of these items to be removed from the consent agenda? Nope, hearing none.
So moved.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve. So moved, second. Scott, thank you. Scott. No discussion for consent agenda. Move on to a roll call vote.
Member Brennan,
Brennan, yes.
Member Winters,
Winters, yes.
Member Wallace,
Wallace, yes.
Member Gustafson,
Gustafson, yes?
Member Lorway,
Norway, yes.
Member Haber,
Haber, yes.
Member Beardmore,
Beardmore, yes.
Chair Renstrom,
Renstrom, yes.
Vice Chair Salmon Garrett.
Sam and Garrett, yes. And just to explain to the public and the people here, these are subcommittees that are not going to be meeting again because they were disbanded. So that's why we were approving the minutes in this consent agenda. Moving on to committee business. Next, we have a motion submitted through citizen request as outlined by School Committee Policy P1660. I would accept a motion to request district administration provide the school committee with PRS problem resolution system data from the 2022-2023 and 2023-2024 school years at the September 9th, 2024 school committee meeting. This data should include, but not be limited to, the complaint number, complaints which were referred to the Office of Civil Rights, whether PRS found the district in compliance or non-compliant, a description of non-compliance, e.g. denial of free appropriate public education, inappropriate transportation services, denial of parents' ability to provide informed consent, etc., corrective action required, e.g. compensatory services, training, policy development, etc., whether the corrective action required third-party involvement, the corrective action deadline, and the date when the corrective action was completed.
So moved.
Second.
Scott and Brett. I have two citizens who wanted to speak on this. And just as a reminder, Ms. Lucas, and this is, we follow the rules of the body since this is an agenda item, so stick specifically to the topic of the motion.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of the things that I would say right now I said previously, so I won't repeat that. I just want to reiterate that we have people, families, children that don't know how to navigate special education law. I mean, the amount of time it takes for a parent to learn the law of special education is just, it's inequitable. This request makes it so that we are all accountable to what is happening to families in the district. It gives us data to see where there's opportunities for growth. It gives us data to see, you know, if we're having our leadership being required to be trained by third parties on special education laws, that's a really big problem. So I put forth this motion because I really want the district and I want this governing body to understand where the issues are so that we can turn this around and start improving outcomes for our students with disabilities.
Thank you. Jana?
Thank you. So I agree that I think this information would be very useful, but I'd love to maybe find a way to put the motion where this information is also put within more context, which I realize sounds like a little bit more work, but so things like we have the complaint number and things like that, but what I don't see here is the number of complaints that were resolved that the district was doing what the district needed to be doing. I'd like to see how they were resolved both ways. I'd also like to see for the number of special ed students, like percentage-wise, how many complaints we're getting for individual students, not from like one particular family. So I feel like data is good data, but I feel like it needs to be within the context of all the other data in order to actually tell me like the full picture. And I'm not quite sure how to rework that motion, and it's not my motion. So does that make sense?
Yeah, come on up.
But a point of order is only,
It says in the
no, this is not a point of order.
whether PRS found the district
Point of order.
in compliance.
Point of order, through the chair. A point of order is specifically to point out something that was being done incorrectly in the process of what the member is saying. So if someone wants to respond to something that was said, that is just a separate asking to be, I'm sorry, just when you're up here, you get to follow the rules.
There's a whole
We all get to follow the rules.
Yes.
So I am not the chair, but if the chair would allow you to respond, that's all you would need to do.
Yeah.
May I
You
respond?
can, yeah, and and stay so that if you want to
Okay,
speak again, you
yeah,
can.
I
Yeah.
Also learning. Through the chair, agreed. It does say that we do, I am interested in the ways that the district has been found in compliance.
Yes, I
It's
see that, yeah.
Yeah, so
Thanks. Yep.
I also-
Member Wallace and then Member Armstrong.
Thank you. So data can be viewed in many different ways. So I agree with Member Brennan, and thank you for bringing this out. I would also like to see similar data for other school districts if we can get that through DESE, with what the compliance issues are across Massachusetts, if it's just the Wachusett district or if it is a global concern. That way we can, as a district, bring that to the state level as well. I believe that many districts are having compliance issues, and I think if we could advocate through our state representatives and our state senators about global issues in the state of Massachusetts, that would be good as well. So I'd like to even have this further, if we could get, I don't know if we can get that data, but I would like to see it if we could get it. That way we can compare.
Thank you. What discussion? Yep. Member Armstrong?
Yes, thank you. I support this motion. Member Lavoie and I had met with the CPAC officers last week, and we talked this through, and we've heard some concerning things, and I feel like my opinion was I didn't have the data I needed to really be able to make judgments about a lot of these things. I understand there's always complaints. Some of them are justified, some of them may not be justified. I think it's important for us to look at this data and understand really what the current state is. Are we having a lot of justified complaints that should raise concerns to us about things we need to do differently? Are most of the complaints found in the district's favor? I don't know the answers to those questions, so it's hard to have a conversation about what issues we really need to focus on. So I think it is important that we look at this data, and I think that the administration look at this data too. So I support the motion. My only questions for administration through the chair would be, is there anything in this list of requests that presents a problem in terms of privacy that we couldn't share? And secondly, is the date that's in the motion realistic? Could we have this date could we have the data in time for that date, or do we need a different date? Through the chair, those are my two questions.
You can answer those questions.
So Barry, you might want to help me out a little bit. I had Barry started to look at some of this data, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what can we do? I think I'd agree with some of the comments as well. We'd like to try to find a way to give a full picture of what this represents. And so, an example is it talks about complaints. Well, within complaints, there can be several allegations. And so it's possible that 6 out of 7 of the allegations, and this is an example, or 3 out of 7, there are findings, or 1 out of 7, or none. And so I think to have a real balanced understanding of this, we want to probably break it down to that level, personally. I don't know, to answer your question, Member Wallace, in terms of, what the numbers are. I mean, we can certainly request from DESE if they know. I can tell you it was a topic of conversation at the Mass Superintendent's Conference that I went to over the summer in July, and that at least allegorically there are cases that said that. That said, I think what I would want to acknowledge, and people have said it earlier, the numbers are really high. And I think we have to acknowledge that, and we should be looking at things like that and asking ourselves, are there issues of compliance that we are continually running into, and what's the best way to address that? And so I think the primary concern for myself, and this is where I was reaching out to Barry, would be the timing, because this is going to be a fairly heavy lift. And I'll share with the committee that the next time we get together for the first September meeting, I'm hoping to share the district improvement plan, and we are in the throes of getting schools ready to open, and addressing some issues that we hadn't anticipated. And so I'd like for us to have more time to do a thorough job of this. One of the things I proposed a little bit earlier when I was talking to somebody about the timeline is perhaps we do it in the second meeting in September. And then also on that docket, I was going to do the district improvement plan that first September meeting and have a special education report for that second meeting in September. And I think it probably would be an apt time to look at that data and report out that data to the committee. But that would just be a suggestion. Barry, I don't know if you feel differently based on what you've seen, or if you think that's doable.
Member Beardmore.
I had the same question as Member Unstrom on the date.
Thank you. Ms. Lucasen was next.
I'll pass. Sorry. Yeah, it's okay.
I think it was Member Gustafson, and I saw you.
I have several comments on this. I am happy to see this. I actually requested this via an email last spring, and it did come up in CPAC meetings with administration last spring with Director DeAngelis. There wasn't a timeline set, but it was discussed many times that we would like this information. So I appreciate this motion. I wish she were here to comment on some of this, but that's beyond us. I will look forward to her report in September, though. About this motion itself, I did share the concern about the date, so I hope we can make some update to that. Two things. I wondered about the request to get the information on other districts. This is a bigger topic, but it's related, though. I think it may be useful to also, I know this data isn't easily accessible on the DESE webpage. They have hearing data on their webpage, but not this data. And I'd like to, I don't know where this goes, but I'd like to raise a note for future business to perhaps put together some sort of resolution, or working with our representatives to make them aware of this, and perhaps we can put some pressure on DESE to change it, or even working on an MASC resolution for next year. It's past this year's date, but something to request that they make this information public for the state, because they do for their hearings and they do for all kinds of other things, but not PSR complaints. And so I think it is a glaring gap in their data. So I do think that would be important to follow up on in some way. I also, I did have a question about what work had already been done to collect some of this, so I'm glad to hear you say we've already started that. One of my concerns is also, or questions as we do this, is also with the data and the number of students versus complaints. Because, for example, the one stated earlier was 17 complaints from one case. Well, that obviously is a case that was not handled correctly, but that's one student, whereas we have over 1,000 special education students in this district. And so I'd like to get more of a sense of the balance of that. You know, is it one or two people, or is it, obviously it's not, but how many of our 1,000 students are having issues? So I think that context would be helpful. So thank you.
One more. Member Haber, and then Ms. Lucasen.
I'd like to amend the motion to change the date to September 23rd, our second school committee meeting in September.
Discuss. So.
Second.
Oh, we have a second. We needed that. So now we're discussing the amendment to make the date September 23rd, the date of our second meeting, as opposed to September 9th. Is there any discussion on the amendment? No, nope. Seeing none, we'll, no?
Me and Scott.
Yep, Sherry and Scott. So seeing no discussion, we will take a roll call vote on the amendment of changing the date to September 23rd.
Member Lorway?
Lorway abstain.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Chair Renstrom?
Lindstrom, yes.
Vice Chair Sam.
Semigary, yes. Ms. Lucasen.
I'm not voting.
Oh, no, yeah, sorry, the amendment passes, so it's now September 23rd. You had your hand raised
Yes,
before that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was following
Yeah.
procedure. So through the chair, I'd like to address Member Gustafson's comment about comparing how many complaints we've had to students and how that would equate to how things are going. And I think that in my role on CPAC over the last few years, one of the things I've gained is experience in what our family's experience is in special education. And the reoccurring theme is that parents give the district blind trust. We trust that teachers and principals and administrators and coordinators and everybody up the chain is doing what is best for our child. And it isn't until that trust is broken that we start moving up the chain, going up the ladder, trying to get information, trying to get support. And it's not until we've reached the very top that we're hitting the state with a complaint. Most parents don't know how to file a complaint. So to say that we're going to compare this data against how many students we have on IEPs is irrelevant, and I think really paints a very false narrative.
I have a comment on that. I do. Can I clarify my comment?
They can't clap.
It is up to you,
Yes,
but
yes.
I did want to clarify that I was not commenting on I was not putting a judgment into that comment. I was merely saying that would be a useful data point. Until we have the data point, I don't think I can make a judgment about it. I also am very familiar with the special education needs in this district and what families go through. I've gone through a lot of it myself personally, although I don't talk about it here. So I do understand that, and I was not placing a judgment on those families. I was merely stating that that data would be helpful in creating the bigger context. I cannot judge what I feel about the data until we have the data. I did just want to clarify.
Dana and then Ms. Lucasen.
Thank you. Can you explain to me, please, why we would need the complaint number? I'm a little shy of including any data that could possibly be traced back to an individual or individual family. Are we looking at individual cases here? Is that what we're being asked to do? Or are we being asked to look at data that will speak to a larger problem?
Thank you. That's another question I had, actually. I was like, is it the specific complaint number or the number of complaints? So I like that she asked that question.
So it's kind of like accounting in my mind. You know, if we're presenting data to the public, and you're presenting a bill, you know, here's the bill number. I'm not looking to see what you were billed for. I'm looking to see what the consequences were, if there were any consequences. So when we're talking about PRS numbers, here is the PRS number. Here are the findings. If there was a finding of noncompliance, here were the corrective measures. And then here's how we corrected it. And did we correct it on time? I mean, it's just kind of a flow of information, first of all. Second of all, we have I specifically requested data from the 2022 to 2023 school year and the 23 to 24 school year. So having those PRS numbers would help you, I would think, as a committee, kind of see, and another data point, here are the complaints we had this school year, and here are the complaints we've had in this most recent school year. Did it increase?
Member Haber.
I read the motion to be understanding that we're getting the number of complaints. I am not good with listing actual complaint numbers that in some case could be brought back to a family. I would not support that in the motion.
I agree 100% that having the complaint number could violate civil rights and could violate people's privacy. If I was a family that had a complaint number brought to this committee, put on public, I would be very upset about that. So I would not support a complaint number for this motion.
So I can take a second amendment on the motion.
I would like to amend the motion to indicate, rather than the words, the complaint number, to change to the number of complaints per year so that it can be separated appropriately.
I second that.
Any discussion on the amendment? Member Gustafson.
This is more of a clarifying statement, but I don't know the answer. I did read this as the complaint number, meaning the individual complaint number. And I was thinking in my head about whether or not that could be used as an identifying number. While they are generally anonymous, I'm not convinced that I think there is a chance. I think of the way healthcare information is handled, and I don't know. I think there's a chance that it could be tied. And so I do share that concern. However, I think if we simply have the number of complaints per year, I think we're going to lose some context and a data point. And I think knowing how many individual complaints there are, or how many individual students, which is what we've already talked about, is important. So I don't know how we change that. I don't know if there's a way to utilize a complaint number that does just show the year, and there's somehow, I'm not sure how we present that. So I guess that's a clarifying question that perhaps needs to be sorted out before we implement this. Because I am concerned about the privacy, but I also understand the need to reflect individual complaints.
Member Haber.
So through the chair to the superintendent, I have not seen one of these complaints directly. So I guess I'm looking for clarification on the word complaint versus the word allegation, and how we can separate the two, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I don't think I'm using the right term. It's not allegation, but in a complaint, which is the form that's filled out by the parent or family or whoever is filling out the PRS document. Within it, there can be several, I'm using the word allegations, but things to be investigated. What I think about all of this, and I'll be honest with you, I haven't asked this question of our attorney in terms of some of these things, but we're gonna share every complaint that we've gotten and have a way to break it down so there's an understanding. This is that complaint. These are the 2, 3, 8 allegations that were made that were asked to be investigated of DESE. These are the numbers that there were findings on, because you could, I think, have more than one finding in a particular complaint. And so it doesn't necessarily work to, I'm not trying to skew the data, I'm just trying to report it in an accurate way. And so that's my thought. I'll be honest with you, I would be looking for us to supply not only the year the complaint was filed, but what it tracks back to. I think there's a year where people can file these complaints, and I can share that. The majority of them that we were seeing in the very beginning had to do with compliance of items that had happened the previous year. And so, we had, at some schools, we had, service compliance at schools that had staffing issues and a number of things. So the complaint would be current year, but the complaint was about missed services from the previous year. And so the way I'm thinking about it, and do you want? Yeah, you want to? Thank you. Sorry. That maybe that to me would be the most useful information, is to be able to look at, and again, similar things. If a family or constituent filed multiple complaints, I do think that's important to put in the total number of allegations and then the finding. But I would agree, I wouldn't want any identifying material if at all possible. I think we got it right.
May I respond?
Yeah.
Just based on that information, I completely support the amendment I put forth.
Right. So I was just going to say, because Jim did have me look into this, and I think we can do a really good job of laying out the data that you're looking for. We don't need to use case numbers. We don't need to boil it all into one big number. We can definitely give you detailed data on all of these. So if I were you, and clearly I'm not, thank God, but I would maybe trim down the language in the motion so that we don't get hung up on discussions about it all night, because we are going to give you the data in detail by case for the years requested.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Lucasen, you keep getting delayed, and I know it's hard.
No, it's, so I just want to make a point. This information is public record, so anyone can go to the DESE website There's a public records request link, and you can request this data, and you would get the complaint number. All the student information, the family information, addresses, phone numbers, that thing, everything like that, redacted.
Right.
But you can request this data as citizens of Massachusetts, and you will get the complaint number.
Can I, through the chair, ask a question? All right. I think, and I don't know, is your concern that the district is going to try to take out certain complaints, or it's a check on whether or not you can accurately vet that we're supplying the information in a way that's trustworthy?
Absolutely not. I am just a very black and white person, and I think that if there's data out there that is accessible to the public, why keep it out?
Any other discussion on the amendment to change the first bullet from the complaint numbers to the number of complaints per year? Any other? No? Okay, we'll call a roll call vote
Member Brennan?
on the amendment.
Brennan, yes.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Abstain.
Member Lorway?
Lorway abstain.
Chair Renstrom?
Lindstrom, yes.
Vice Chair Salmon Garrett?
Salmon Garrett, yes. The motion passes. And you're staying up for the next one, right?
No, we have to vote on the
No.
Oh, we have to vote on the
Motion.
whole thing down. Thank you. See? So any other discussion on the full motion? No. Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote on the full motion amended.
Member Lorway?
Lorway, no.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Somebody needs to mute.
Member Winters?
Winters abstain.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Chair Renstrom?
Lindstrom, yes.
Vice Chair Salmon Garrett?
Salmon Garrett, yes. And the motion passes. Thank you. A second motion submitted through citizen request per policy P1660. I would accept a motion to request the district collaborate with all stakeholders to create a special education manual accessible to staff and families to ensure understanding and compliance with special education laws. Ms. Lucasen, would you
So
like?
moved.
Oh, second.
Second.
Gotcha. Thank you. Getting tired.
Sorry, who seconded that?
Jana.
Jana.
Thank you.
Ms. Lucasen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, briefly. So the premise of this motion is that we have individuals in the district who are citing special education law incorrectly to families who don't know the law. So I think just all around good faith step would be to create a manual with stakeholder input and make it accessible to everybody so that we all have a reference to look at.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
I,
None? Oh, sorry. Gustafson.
I think she was first.
Okay. Member Wallace?
So I read through all the other school districts' manuals, and as an administrator and a past team chair, a lot of the similarities to these handbooks were what we gave or supposed to give parents prior to a special education meeting. Perhaps, and this is maybe going off the motion, and please clarify if I can, but I made a statement back in May that perhaps the district would benefit from organizing a special education task force that would address this handbook, would address these, the prior motion, create or develop or revise a special education vision, investigate the historical perspective of the district, survey all the stakeholders, and then create an actionable plan with short-term and long-term goals and objectives. I think we're going down a rabbit hole, in my opinion, with all these snippets of requests when we could have a comprehensive plan, a task force to look at it globally. Thank you.
Member Gustafson?
Okay. I agree that most of this information should be more accessible to the public. I don't know that this is perhaps the best way to go about it at the moment. What has been discussed previously, and I discussed in several others, is I know a lot of this. Some of it used to be on our website. I know our website has been non-existent in the special education section for at least a year. It's been under reconstruction. It has been a point of contention that has been brought up many times by families, by CPAC, by other individuals around this table, we've been told we're working on it, but none of this basic information, some of which is on the DESE site, has even been put up as basic links again, and I think that is highly problematic. I think if we are able to have that done, that will address a lot of this information. I think the notion of a handbook is great, but I also don't know if it's necessary at this point. I think having this information accessible is, and a lot of it is required by law to be accessible, and we are not doing that right now. But I don't think this handbook is the answer. I think if we could simply get it on our website, at least in some interim form while the redesign is happening, that would solve a lot of this problem. I also do think I think there was a motion or a mention of somewhere in these sample handbooks about vision. We have requested that numerous times as well. I know I did a couple this spring in this public meeting and said we really need to hear a vision from our special education director. And I know she's working on it. So my question is, where is this work now? And can we get some of these documents linked on our website?
Let's stick to the topic of the handbook, please.
I'm sorry. So I don't think the handbook is the way to do this. I think there are other ways it can be addressed.
Thank you.
But I think it's essential that it be addressed.
Ms. Lucasen?
2 points, I was just going to
No,
mention
no.
that she had requests.
I saw her get up.
No, you go.
And may I?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure I'm following the rules. So I think talking about the semantics of the word choice of handbook here, the crux of the issue is we need policies and procedures for special education. And as we mentioned or alluded to earlier, like Lindsay said, this is great to have and to be collaborative, but in one of our recent PRS findings, and I'll read it again, based on the information gathered, the department finds the district did not comply with 34 CFR 300.201 because the district does not have policies and procedures readily available as required. There's regulation, there's policy memo from DESE, and there's requirements through the conditions of assistance for IDEA Part B. And so there's corrective actions that we already have in place. And to the earlier point of not having a formal procedure manual, the issue is we don't have the procedures. We don't have the procedures or the policies. And that needs to happen through corrective action from DESE. So it's going to we're going to be ordered to do that. And it really isn't something for debate, but
Let's stick to the handbook.
well, but that's what I'm talking about. The policies and procedures are the handbook. Isn't that what the motion is requesting? A special education manual, which is policies and procedures?
Is it policies or is it just procedures? I don't want to confuse policies with procedures.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So the policies say that you have to have procedures, and if we don't have procedures, we're not complying. We don't have procedures right now. That's the point. So either you decide to do a procedure manual, or you create a mismatch of policies or procedures, and you post them somewhere on our website. But that doesn't seem to be a thoughtful, organized way to collaborate and share information with families.
Thank you. I think it was Member Lorway first, Member Lorway, and then Member Haber.
Thank you. Both of these motions, I perfectly well understand the need and the feelings behind them. Some of you now know that I've tried to work with CPAC on helping to resolve some of these issues of what families need, of the communication that we need, and have not, nobody's taken me up on that. I presented a motion to provide families on all stakeholders with definitions of the definitions that we use to provide services as a step toward this kind of thing, a manual or a handbook. I understand what's behind both of these motions, but I think that piecemeal is a word that comes to mind by saying, we want you to do this now, by September 23rd, by September 9th, we want a handbook, we want this. I don't think that's the way we're going to fix the problem, that we need a vision, that we need information on our website. I'm not saying that what's happening right now with our special education department is all going great. I wish that Director DeAngelis were at the meeting. I wish I could be there in person. But I don't think that forcing through motions because a group of people want something right now is the way to do it. I would like more time to think about these motions that have been presented, to fix the wording, to converse with CPAC, and I don't want to just be someone who's voting on this when I care very deeply about the subject, as I think everyone at that table knows, and I think everyone at CPAC knows. I'm not going to vote for something this quickly and without the opportunity to discuss and think about it. You can't just order a handbook. It takes a long time to write a handbook, coming back to the handbook. And people are trying to take steps to make that happen, or make something that would function as a handbook or manual happen. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you. Member Haber.
I have a couple issues with just how the motion's written, and the first is clarification of what actually would be in a handbook. It's, and these aren't questions that I'm asking for an answer for, but just considerations of, is it procedure that we already have in place that we are documenting, or are we writing new procedure? Are we extending it beyond the DESE requirements and listing small things that we do differently in our district versus another district? It also says all stakeholders. I want to know who all stakeholders is, because we need to follow whatever we're going to do. So does all stakeholders mean CPAC, because all parents are allowed to be part of CPAC? Does it mean all special ed parents? Does it mean all parents? Does it mean all the community? I want to know if all stakeholder feedback means that we're going to do a survey, that we have to have a subcommittee, that we are going to have a task force, that we can do it in a small committee. Like, it's just not clear enough for me to have a comprehensive understanding of exactly what we're making and who's doing it and what's going to be included.
Member Beerbohr.
And then Scott.
I can withdraw my hand.
Okay, thank you. Member Runstrom. You're muted.
You're muted.
You see, I was trying to mute to get the sound out. But all right, so I hear what other people are saying. But I feel like this is almost aspirational. I think this is just asking that we do it, and I think we should do it, right? It's not saying by when, it's not even saying who does it, which we're gonna have to figure out. I feel like I'm okay with supporting this, because I feel like we should do this. We need to figure out everything that Member Haber just said. We need to figure out all the stuff that Member Lorway just said. But that's not gonna stop me from supporting this, because I just feel like we should do this. And it's going to take some time. I think probably the reason that Ms. Lucasen didn't put a date in here is she knows it's going to take some time. You know, and I don't think that manual versus a website, those aren't two different things for me. The manual should be on the website. They should be one and the same thing. So I don't have a problem supporting this. I do feel like there's going to be a lot of next steps before this thing actually gets delivered, but I think we should do it. And I'm happy to support this motion to put our foot in the sand and say, yes, we should go forward and start doing this.
Ms. Lucasen?
Yeah, I'd like to propose an amendment to this motion. I'd like to propose that the motion be changed to request the district collaborate with the school committee and CPAC to create special education policies and procedures that are available to the public.
Second, what? Can she move that?
No.
No.
So moved.
Second. Scott moved it.
Jamie second.
Jamie seconded it. Would you like to speak to the amendment first? Speak to the amendment?
I just think that clears up all the confusion.
Member Haber?
I can't vote for a motion that would include policy. If you want to take it back to the handbook, I can support that, but I can't support a motion that would mandate external involvement in policymaking, that would mandate it. I don't want to say that.
Can
we
you
have to do
clarify, can you repeat that? You said X something, external? You said external involvement? What does that mean?
Just, I'm sorry, without having it in front of me, I can't remember exactly what you said. But the way that I heard it, you said that CPAC and school committee would create something that includes policies and procedures. Now, that would create policy and procedure is the way that I heard it.
Okay.
Now, if you're saying, if the intended meaning was that you would create a book that includes school committee policies and district-wide procedures, that makes sense to me, but that's not how I heard the amendment.
My apologies. Again, I'm new to this.
No, I'm with you.
That is what
clarify.
that's what I'm getting at.
Okay.
School committee create policies, the district create procedures around special education laws, special education services, all that encompass special education, and make it publicly available.
And this motion is just stating that those things will be?
Yes.
Okay.
So Randy
that
has
the,
to put something in the minutes, exactly what we're voting on.
Okay, let's,
Just,
okay.
it just needs to.
Let's clarify what the amendment would be so we can vote on the correct thing. So I believe you took out all stakeholders.
I'll repeat it.
Okay, great.
To request,
Can you just talk a little slower?
sure, yep.
Yeah.
To request, the school committee create policies and the district create procedures around special education laws and services provided in the district. Period.
Okay.
Publicly available, sorry.
Yeah.
That's the biggest part. That's the biggest part. And that they are publicly available to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any discussion on the amendment? Member Gustafson?
I have a logistical question. Again, I support the intent of this motion and the amendment, but are we allowed to, as a school committee, request or essentially mandate that the administration create certain procedures? Because our realm is policy, not procedures. And so that's my concern with this whole general concept. I also feel a little uneasy without having, honestly, procedurally, without having the input of, or at least the voice of our special education administration, to either via Jim or our chair, on where they are now with some of this and how much needs to get done and whether they think this is even feasible, or if it's work that they already are supposed to be doing, that, I'm just, it seems a little messy to me, but my core question with this is, are we allowed to mandate procedures be created, because that is outside of our realm? And I think they might already exist, we just don't have them. Yes.
I don't know that, I do believe that there are some procedures somewhere. I mean, if they're written down or not, I'm not saying, I don't know. But I don't think that this mandates administration to create procedures. There are procedures in place for special education, whether written or not. And we are creating a handbook and acknowledging what those procedures are.
But was the handbook part of the motion, or is it a different motion?
Well,
It's a different motion.
she didn't use the word handbook, but she did indicate that they would be made publicly available, which I believe is the point was the original intention of having a handbook, was so that the information could be made publicly
That's
available.
already in the law, though, and so that is my concern.
We're talking over each other. I'm sorry.
Ms. Lucas, out of hand.
Chair, excuse me. So handbook, website, I encompass that with readily available to the public. So not having to request it specifically, but readily available. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Anyone? Any other? So we're discussing the amendment to the motion, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the amendment read to request the school committee create policies and the district create procedures that, about special education that would be publicly available.
I had around sped services in the law in the district to make it publicly available.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other discussion on the amendment? I do myself have some concerns about this amendment. And I know these motions are hard to make. So I absolutely see the intent, and I completely agree with the intent of the publicly available information. I did myself look at the district website, the CPAC website. Both of them didn't really have much updated information. So I do agree that a manual of some sort would be good. But, okay, so
So
Member Wallace.
I agree with the intent, but special education laws, is that the federal laws? Is that the state laws? There's a vast amount of special education laws. Do we need to be specific on which special education laws we're going to create policy and procedures for? The IDA is many, many laws. Just want to make that.
Member Brennan.
Yeah, so looking back at the amended motion now, I still go back to that the school committee will create policy. This motion sounds more like instructing us to create certain things, not just post them. And so that's where I'm a little bit confused. I feel like the language should be tightened up a little bit if we're literally just voting to say that the policies and procedures that we currently have will be presented to the public in a way that is readily accessible.
Mm-hmm.
That I am okay with. I feel like the creation part is a totally separate thing, and I don't want to get them muddied up, if that makes sense.
Member Runstrom, then Ms. Lucas.
Thank you. I feel like we're going down a rabbit hole of trying to wordsmith this motion, and it's going to get really hard. So my suggestion is that I work with Ms. Lucasen to reword this motion for our next meeting to come back in something I think that I could definitely support and gets the intent that she's getting to, because I think most of us support the intent of this motion, and we're going around in circles on what it should exactly say. So I'd like to ask if that's acceptable to everyone. I'd rather just put this off to our next meeting. So I will make a motion to defer. What's the proper motion? To defer this motion to our next meeting. Can you? I don't have my cheat sheet with me.
We're on the amendment.
We're on the amendment.
On the amendment.
Yeah.
Or-
Okay.
or-
so I'll
or
hold
Ms.
off on that.
Lucasen-
But like that's my suggestion is that we pass over this motion tonight and we come back with a motion that I think will be acceptable to everybody. I'm going to leave it at that. I make no motion.
So per Robert's rules, Ms. Lucasen could withdraw her motion, and then somebody could make a motion that this is
Brought to our next meeting.
brought to our next meeting.
If I withdraw the motion, does that prohibit the motion being brought back
No.
at any point?
No, not the court of law. We're
Okay,
good.
well, I'm just, listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know.
There are no policy and procedures. Okay, I withdraw.
Thank you. Member Haber.
I would like to make a motion to bring the topic of handbook for special education or similar to the next meeting.
Second.
Similar to the next meeting. Okay. So the motion is to bring the topic of a handbook for special education or similar to the next full school committee meeting. And we have a second. Do
That
we
way
have-
you could change it
Yeah.
if you don't want to say handbook.
Yeah. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
Just really, really quick. I'm happy to work with Ms. Lucasen to get the wording of this in a way that's acceptable to her on the agenda for the next meeting.
Thank you, Member Ostrom. Member Gustafson, Member Wallace.
Thinking of how to word this. All right. I don't know how to word this, so I'm just trying to think about this. Can I make a request that when we also discuss this, that we get an update from our Director of Special Education about where this process is currently? Because I think there is some work being done on this that we have not seen. This is my request, to know where we are before we make a motion to reinvent things. I would like to know where we are currently.
We are getting a special education update in the second
Meeting. So this
meeting
is
of
my
September, so
concern.
could we ask that is?
Yes, but then we'd have a concern on voting for this process prior to that update. So I'm concerned that we would do that out of order. I think that update might be helpful in informing this discussion and/or related to this discussion. So that is my concern.
Okay.
My question, concern, whatever you want to call it.
Member Wallace, then Member Lorway.
No, I was just going to state that I'm more than willing to work on this wording as well, if you need to.
Thank you. Member Lorway.
Thank you. I just wanted to offer that I, as well, would be very willing to work with Chair Redstrom and with Ms. Lucasen and CPAC on the wording of this.
Ms. Lucasen. Did you have, I think you had.
Do I have an opportunity to try one more amendment through the chair? That's a question.
To the old,
To mine, she can
oh,
only.
only to the one that she made.
Okay,
You can make an amendment,
okay. And so we're discussing the next meeting.
which was bringing the topic of a handbook for special education or similar
Yep.
to the next full school committee meeting.
So I would like to amend that, if possible, to request that the district have in effect policies and procedures that are consistent with state policies and procedures established under Federal Law 300-101 through 300-163 and 300.165 through 300.164.
So that's completely changing the motion. That's not, in addition, that's,
She can completely change the motion, but
which is allowed.
someone has to second it.
Somebody has to second
If-
the amendment. Mhm. Oh, somebody has to make, somebody has to make
someone
the
has to make
motion and then second it for the amendment, a member of the school committee.
Can I ask a point of order of someone who's not a member?
Sure.
No, you're saying no, okay. I would like to know what those policies are. This is what I don't know. I need to know what they cover.
Information, not a point of-
I mean, I think I know, but I think we need to know before we can vote on it.
Well, we're not discussing the amendment yet because we do
Okay,
not
I'm
have
so
a
sorry.
a first or a second. So
Okay.
we're not discussing the amendment.
Scott has his hand raised.
Oh, Scott?
Yeah, so me again. I'm going to suggest that we just vote no to everything right now. And as I said, I'm happy to come back with a new motion for the next meeting and start this discussion fresh.
Okay, so right now, we do not have first or second to the amendment that Ms. Lucas stated, so we are back to the motion to bring the topic of the handbook for special ed or similar to the next full school committee meeting. Do we have any other discussion on that? And that is what we will be voting on. Seeing no further discussion, I will ask for a roll call vote.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Salmon Garrett?
Sam and Garrett, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Member Lorway?
Baldwin, yes.
And Chair Renstrom?
Renstrom, yes.
And the motion passed? Okay, thank you. Okay. Moving on. Lost it. Moving on to Treasurer's Report Financial Statement. The Treasurer's Report was not in your packets. Those will be presented to the Business and Finance Subcommittee at Thursday's meeting. Next on the agenda is CPAC report from a member of school committee, Member Rundstrom. Do you have anything to report?
I think CPAC reported out, gave their own report today. Member Lavoie and I did meet with the CPAC administrators last week. We discussed the motions that we're going to be on tonight and the importance of looking at the PRS data. That's all the update I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is subcommittee reports. First up is the policy subcommittee. Member Kirschenbaum is not here. Does anybody have anything to report from the policy subcommittee?
The policy subcommittee has not met yet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We will be meeting, though.
In the end of August, I believe?
Yes.
Okay. The Business and Finance Subcommittee, Member Brennan.
Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, it's been a long meeting. I'm trying to remember what we did at Business and Finance last in July. But we did have a workshop for new members on reading and understanding warrants, and which was great. And Director Grisey and our new treasurer are working on a presentation that can be used by all business and finance members just as a resource anytime they need to, when they want to go through warrants so that they can understand them properly. Last time we met officially for a full meeting, though, was in July. And we discussed looking at policies for business and finance and which ones we feel need to be looked at as a priority this year. As well as obviously talked a little bit about the FY23 audit. That was before the audit was done, though. And closing out FY24. We do have another meeting coming up this Thursday, and the agenda, if not already posted, will be posted by tomorrow.
And you have a motion on that?
And I have a motion on the agenda. So I would like to, make a motion to accept, wait, where is it? Sorry, to amend policy DP 4713.1, policy relating to budget finance audit advisory board, first reading.
Waiving the reading.
Waiving the reading.
Second.
Janet and Sherry, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure. So, oh,
Speak to it and then he goes.
okay. So Business and Finance looked at the Audit Advisory Board policy over the course of this year as the finances of the district and everything was getting back on track. We thought that it was important to look at the policy and see that it was current with the way that we were currently working. So we did discuss it in a few meetings. Member Gustafson had talked to our legal department, which discussed a little bit about Audit Advisory Board and its uniqueness, that apparently legally we don't have to have an Audit Advisory Board. But in our business and finance discussions, we decided that in order to keep transparency with the towns, that we would continue that, and so that we would adjust the policy. And so we just made a few very basic changes, basically just to work more with the way that Audit Advisory Board is working and to make it a little bit more clear when reading the policy, how Audit Advisory Board works. And so we worked on this with Director Grisey as well.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Oh, Scott, sorry.
Yes.
That's okay. So I actually I read this policy. I don't have any issues with it. Some members have raised concerns that we're not following our policy, referring it to the subcommittee. I understand this came from, they were working on it last year, so it's kind of a gray area whether it needs to be referred to the subcommittee first, but I'm just pointing it out. I think it might be a reasonable course of action to refer it to Business and Finance and have them just vote to bring it back to the full committee. But I think that's up to us tonight, which way we want to move. I don't have any problems with the way it's written. Just if we follow our policy to the letter, we should refer it back to Business and Finance and then have them vote it back to the full committee. That's
Right, so essentially, it was completed before that new policy, our policy subcommittee was finalized, but it didn't make it onto our last agenda meeting, so it's coming to the school committee, even though it was worked on at Business and Finance before that was finished. So that's where we are now. So it is here. If the school committee would like to vote on it as is, that is their prerogative, or I would say we can send it back to Business and Finance, where we will officially vote on it and then recommend it back up to the school committee. I leave that up to you guys.
Member Beerboard?
Seems awfully inefficient to go through all of that. I would propose to move forward with the vote tonight.
Oh, I was just going to reiterate that this is something that has been in discussion for 2 years at least, with Director Grisey and the AAB in this committee, and Business and Finance as well. And it just was a matter of when it fit on our agenda with so many direct finance things we've been dealing with the past couple of years, that it took some time to actually get through the amending of it. So it's been something that was a need that it was expressed over 2 years ago, because our current policy does not line up with what we actually do and how we operate and best practices now, and hadn't been revised for quite some time. So I'm indifferent as to what the rest of the committee wishes to do, but this has been something that has been under discussion for about 2 years.
Member Haber?
If I remember correctly, our policy our policy-making policy indicates that we can dispense with the timeline if needed and procedures.
Okay.
So I would be fine, considering that it's already in process.
Okay. So any discussion on the motion that we will be voting on tonight? Seeing none, we'll move to a roll call vote.
Chair Haber?
I'm not the chair, but yes.
You could be. Member Haber?
Yes.
Member Lorway? Oh, I'm sorry, she left the meeting.
Do we have?
Can you check quorum, Randy?
Say again?
Check if we have quorum.
Oh, yeah.
I put that on the screen so you can show that. Do
Yeah,
it.
can you?
Yeah, do I just go back to the original?
Yeah, you want to see.
I want to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, go back.
Barry, once you find it, can you put it on the screen just so others can see, please?
She is. Yeah, we still have quorum.
Yeah, plenty.
Can you just, okay.
5.27.
Wow. Oh, that's because Dana's from Princeton.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so we're still moving on with the roll call vote since we still have quorum. Sorry, Randy.
No, those,
I
you
just
got
don't
it,
want
Chad.
to screw up the spreadsheet, because now the first sheet is now changed, so then it's gonna,
Oh,
Okay.
so if you want to see that for,
no, I just wanted it just for quorum so people knew we had
okay.
quorum. That was,
Yeah.
okay.
Here's your quorum. No, wait, there it is. 8.38.
Okay,
With only 8.01 needed.
thank you.
I can might as well show you.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Chair Renstrom?
Renstrom abstain.
And Vice Chair Salmon Garrett.
Sam and Garrett, yes. Anything else from Business and Finance?
Nope.
The motion passed, thank you.
Thank you.
So next is Legal Affairs Subcommittee. I will give that update. The Legal Affairs Subcommittee met on August 6th. We discussed current negotiations with the ABA PAs and the custodial unit. We will have an executive session at this meeting to discuss those at one of the meetings in September. I am also going to share the news that Wachusett's Paraprofessional Union has worked with the Department of Labor Relations to separate from their former labor union. The district is working with them to plan for negotiations to commence soon. And we will meet again as needed, as we do at Legal Affairs. Next up is Superintendent Goals and Evaluation Subcommittee. Member Poole is the chair. He's not here.
I can comment. We have not met yet. We are going to be meeting in the last week in August.
Thank you, Member Wallace. Next is the Facilities and Security Subcommittee. Member Woodland is not here. Does anybody have an update?
Yeah, I have a little one. I felt like the superintendent report was very inclusive, so there's not too much to add, but I just want to highlight the dates and the facilities we toured in July. It was a busy month for us. So on July 22nd, we toured the Glenwood facility. On July 23rd, we toured the high school and the Davis Hill facility, and we ended that day with a short subcommittee meeting. On the 25th, we toured the Houghton Chaucet School, and then on the 29th, we had a regular subcommittee meeting.
Thank you.
Can I add something to that?
Yep.
I just want to thank that committee, Facilities and Security Subcommittee. A couple of the tours, we had representation from all 5 towns, which is kind of incredible when people are going to a facility that's in a different town. And then I also know that some of the members took days off to be part of that tour, and so I just would like to thank them for their efforts, which I think are outstanding.
Thank you. Next is Audit Advisory Board. Member Lavoy is the chair. He's not here tonight, so I will read a report provided by him, and then we will move on to the motion on the agenda. The Audit Advisory Board met on July 18th. During the meeting, the board reviewed its role per WRSD SC Policy 4713.1. The board acknowledged perception of WRSD SC noncompliance with Policy 4713.1 in the past. The board was presented with, reviewed, and discussed the FY23 audit. The board discussed the importance of capturing meeting minutes and has provided draft minutes of the July 18th, 2024 meeting in the event any party needs to review them in advance of their approval. The board discussed scheduling of its next meeting, which has tentatively been set for October 29th, 2024. At this time, I will accept a motion to accept the annual financial statements and governance letter prepared by District Auditors Markham LLC for fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
Director Grisey, do you want to speak to the motion? No?
I don't know that I really have to say anything other than the fact that the audit is wrapped up, and it's just up to the committee to accept that we're done and move along.
Thank you. Member Brennan?
I would just like to commend Director Grisey and her whole team. The audit this year had one very small finding, which is actually already taken care of, the cash reconciliation. And so we moved from some very major findings in the past couple of years to basically none. So just commendation and well done and very impressive.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ditto.
Okay, so we will move to a roll call vote on the motion.
Member Brennan?
Brennan, yes.
Member Beardmore?
Beardmore, yes.
Member Winters?
Winters, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Wallace?
Wallace, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Chair Renstrom?
Redstrom, yes.
Vice Chair Salmon Garrett?
Salmon Garrett, yes. Moving on to school council reports. I'm going to guess that we don't have any school council reports yet. Everyone should be getting communication from the principals of the schools that they will be representing this year fairly soon. Next is new business. Do we have any new business this evening? Seeing none, having completed all business on the agenda for this evening, I declare this meeting is adjourned.
9:58.
Word.
Good job. Hit the gavel. It doesn't count until you hit the gavel.
Thank